All right, folks. Good morning, good afternoon. It's about time. It's the top of the hour for me, so let's get started. I see a lot of folks are still joining, so we'll start slow and let people come in and settle in. So welcome to the Chilling and Maui workshop. This is a longer format. Webinar workshop where we just try to build something. Now it is, not as, easy as when I am in person with you, which would be lovely. I do, dotnet maui type workshops in, lots of conferences, but again, that involves an expense, that involves travel. Hopefully you are, at your desk or on your couch and you can just, follow along. So the chat is going to be our best friend today. So whatever comes to mind, wherever you are, maybe experiencing some roadblocks, please fire away at the chat. It's all me today. I am all you got. So, I will take a pause and I will respond to any questions you might have, any concerns you might have, and let's have a little fun. I'm Sam. I'm your host for the day, Sam Basu. I don't have any pretty slides today. It's a workshop, right? We want to get things done. So I don't have any slides, nothing intro, nothing, what is dotnet maui. Hopefully, I mean, we can walk through a little bit of what it is, modern cross-platform development, but otherwise it's a lot of doing. First half, let's kind of get into the tooling. Let's understand, modern .NET. Let's understand, how to build native cross-platform apps with, with XAML and C#. I will be on a Mac. I will be on Windows as well. And then in the second half, let's bring in some web things. Let's look at some Blazor. Let's look at some, code sharing and bringing your web apps to mobile and desktop. Okay, so that's the plan. It's pretty informal, so please fire things away in chat, and I will try my best to keep an eye on it. For maybe those of you who have not heard, we're going to start with the basics here. So this is .NET Multi-Platform App UI. If you do a search, this is likely the page that you're going to end up with. The P is silent because Maui sounds so much better than MPAUI. This is essentially an evolution of what we used to have called Xamarin Forms, and now it's much bigger than what it was before, because now it's essentially looking forward. This is the evolution of .NET cross-platform strategy going forward. So if you're building a mobile app and you want to use .NET, this is the thing that I would suggest. If you're building a desktop app as well, sure, you can do WinUI, but I mean, I would almost suggest going with this, because from a single code base, now you really can do mobile and desktop very nicely. So it's got some legs. Sure, still early days. So .NET MAUI first came out, in May, I think, of 2022. That was with .NET 6. So let's also do where .NET is at. So let's go back a step. So if I just look up .NET, right? So for folks of you who are .NET developers, if you're a Blazor, and Blazor developers are .NET, but I'm saying if you are a JavaScript developer, maybe if you're new to the ecosystem, again, this is the place to start. And if you look at .NET's evolution, it's free, it's open source, the tooling is cross-platform, it works everywhere, it's modern, productive, and all the things. So right now, as we speak, we are sitting on .NET 7. As the production-ready version of .NET that you should be using. I will be using .NET 7 today, but again, you don't have to. You can also run the same things with .NET 6, because .NET MAUI came out with .NET 6. And then it kind of evolved quite a bit more with .NET 7, bringing on desktop functionality. And then we're already looking at .NET 8. We're up to like preview 3. So every November you get a new version of .NET. Alternate years you get what's called LTS, long-term support. So .NET 8 will be long-term support. So a lot of enterprises and a lot of developers are kind of used to this cadence now of getting .NET every November. You don't have to update every November if you don't want to. See right here, it says .NET Preview 3, .NET 8 is available. So a lot of good things happening. Again, if you are, if you have a brand new machine, excuse me, get the dotnets. It's, be it on Windows, be it on Mac, it's going to be all of the installers are right there. So just fire away. It's just a folder now. It's not a system-wide installation. You can, blow away .NET and you can re-get it back. You can bundle .NET with your apps. So it's a good place to be. So let me check chat here, nothing else. Okay, so I will keep going. So granted that you have .NET, the next step would be to get .NET MAUI. So again, you can read up a lot on this. There is a lot of guidance and resources and learning materials around MAUI because it's been around for a while now. But this is the place to start. If I say, let's open up the docs just in case, but if I hit the Get Started button, it kind of recognizes that I am on a Mac, so it kind of guides me down the macOS path, but you can also, go switch up to Windows and see what it is that you need. So in terms of prerequisites, if you want to follow along what I'm trying to do here, you are going to need some bits to get going, right? And you don't have to have Visual Studio, although that might be the easiest thing. So command line tools is also something that is, that works perfectly fine between Windows and Mac. So if I do, let's do a .NET. Oh, see, I have done this search before. So this might be the, lowest way to get started, right? So .NET is just an environment now. And let me pull up my terminal. And yeah, hopefully you can still see. I'm going to make the text a little bigger. So if I do a .NET, and if I look at the version of .NET that I am running right now, it's a 7. Right, that's the .NET I'm working on. I think if I do a list of my SDKs, you're going to see that I have some .NET 6. I've had some .NET 7. I had .NET 8, but I've since cleaned up a little bit. So that's the way to start. If you must have .NET 6 or 7 to run any of the things that we're doing. I mean, .NET 8 works as well. And then if you, for some reason, do not want to get Visual Studio, then your command line tool will still work. You need to do a .NET workload install MAUI. MAUI is a workload now. And essentially, that's going to give you all the dependencies for the runtime for iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. Right, so and then you can do .NET build, you can do .NET restore, so everything command line also works just fine. But for the most part, when you come down here, like I'm on a Mac here, it's going to step you through, like you need to go and download Visual Studio for Mac. If you're on Windows, go get Visual Studio for Windows, and essentially they will have you choose the .NET MAUI, app UI workload. So once you have that, it gets all the bits that are needed for iOS and Android, because again, fundamentally these are cross-platform apps we're talking about, so you do need to depend on Android SDKs and iOS SDKs. The way we reach Mac is also kind of through the iOS SDK. So that's the thing that Apple likes to call Mac Catalyst. That's Apple's way of bridging the gap. So if you have an iPad app, it's a big enough surface area, there is no reason why it cannot now work on Mac, the desktop. So that's the bridge that .NET MAUI also uses to reach the Mac as a desktop. So it's going to, these are things that you don't need to think about. It's going to get all of the dependencies there right for you. And then it kind of steps you through like how you create a new app. So all of the stuff that you need, it's all documented. So hopefully you have all of the bits. If not, while we are doing this, go ahead and get the bits so we can get started. But be it on Windows or Mac, the dev experience is about the same. Now, there are some differences in terms of how you build your apps, and this is a question we get a lot. So can I be on Windows and still be targeting iOS? The answer is complicated. It's yes and no, because the no is because these are native apps. So you do need a Mac that's running Xcode to do the build, because you need an app package that you can throw onto the devices or on the desktop, and it's an Apple restriction that you need to build your iOS devices or iOS apps on Xcode that is licensed to the same developer that has the store account, because we're talking native apps that go in the stores, and no one can get you around that. However, you don't always need to have a physical Mac. Sometimes people have a Mac sitting there somewhere on their network. You might also use some cloud services where you are kind of paying a little bit for a Mac, but you're just going to the Mac to just do a build. And Visual Studio on Windows will do a little pairing, a little handshake with with your Mac to make sure that it can go talk to Xcode, do the build, and come back. So the Mac world is pretty easy. So I'm going to pull up Visual Studio for Mac. And again, things work in VS Code as well, but the dev experience is just better in VS 2020 for Mac. So let's start up a new project here. And you can see that I have these templates installed. So if I go into multi-platform, if I go into my app, I do have some Xamarin Forms ones installed as well, but these are the two primary templates, .NET MAUI app and .NET MAUI Blazor app. So if I go into my terminal, and if I do a .NET new, I think we can just do list, maybe, -- list, maybe. Yeah, so these are all the templates that my Visual Studio knows. Now, this is a little bit more than what Visual Studio shows you. I have, a lot of, preview stuff, but this is the same thing. Like I can do a .NET new MAUI, or I can do a .NET new MAUI Blazor. The project that is scaffolded is exactly the same as what Visual Studio will do. So you are in a good place whether you want to do CLI or Visual Studio. Now, this is the Visual Studio experience on a Mac. The Windows one is exactly the same. However, I will mention one quick thing, and for that, let me actually pull up my Windows machine. I do have a Windows box that's sitting under my desk, but this is a VM because I get to be on the same machine. So I'm going to pull up Windows 11, and it comes up fairly fast. This is on Parallels, so it's running as a VM. The one thing to note is if you happen to be on a Windows machine, which is ARM powered, then you need to be on certain previews to get the MAUI bits. Hold on, I heard a ding. Okay, nothing else in chat. Okay, so here I am on my Windows, and you will notice that I have Visual Studio 2022 preview. However, it's like 17.3 forward, I think is what you need to do. So let me do a window. Is there an about us? No, Windows security. You can go away for now. File. No, show me an about us, about Visual Studio. Okay, there we go. So this is 17.6 preview 3 is what I'm running. I think they have one more preview after that. But I think then 17.6, I think preview 2 or 3 is when they released the ARM bits. So you can see this is ARM 64. So if you're wanting to do .NET MAUI development on an ARM machine, you need to be at least that preview and forward. Otherwise, some of the templates are not going to be visible. So if I do a file new here, project, you will see that I have the same exact templates, the MAUI and the MAUI Blazor. So make sure you see these templates in your Visual Studio. If you don't, then you don't have the workloads installed. Sometimes Visual Studio gets a little confused with the workloads. You might have to, reinstall the workloads, or, worst case, reinstall Visual Studio. But again, for the most part, it should be understanding what you're trying to do and get you going. Okay, so I don't need Windows right now, so I'm going to turn this off for a minute. We can come back to Windows a little bit later on, but otherwise, the dev experience is pretty much exactly the same. All right, so just so it doesn't, sit there and chew through my memory, I'm going to turn that off. So Parallels can quit. All right. Let's start up a new app. Like I said, I will, maybe we can split the time. Maybe we can do a MAUI app for maybe, 60% of the time, and the remaining 40%, I do want to go to Blazor and show you some things. So let's start up a new MAUI app, and this is where you get to choose the target framework. Like I said, you can do it on 6 and 7. I don't have .NET 8 right now, but you can also run the same bits on .NET 8. So let's do .NET 7, which is our, stable production ready version. So let's do MAUI workshop. And again, hopefully you're following along or you're doing this with me. Please let me know if you have any questions. So we'll hit create, and Visual Studio is going to spin up a new project for me. And let's stop here for a second. I will check again. No questions yet. I see all of you. I wish that you could turn on your cameras so I could see you, but I don't think the platform actually allows that. So it's a little one-way street, which is sad. But again, Oh, and maybe I should ask you this, folks. Can you chime in and say where you're joining from? Because I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in East Coast time in the Americas. But is any of you from Europe? Is any of you from Asia Pacific? I would love to know where you're tuning in from. Yep. Okay, so let's take a look at what we get out of the box, right? So here is a .NET MAUI project. Let's see. Well, there is a questions panel. Oh, I see. Some of you are doing questions instead of chat. That's fine too. Christian is asking, is the webinar being recorded? Yes, Christian, it is being recorded. It's going to be about 3 hours of content, but yes, it is being recorded. We'll push this out to YouTube's as quickly as we can. Okay, Ray is asking, or rather commenting, I don't see a MAUI option in VS22 for Mac. Aha. So when you don't see that, Ray, essentially it means that the workloads are not there yet. You might want to go back through Visual Studio. So on your VS for Mac, so let's do a search here. Unlike Windows, this may be a difference here. Windows has a separate kind of a file system where you can pull up the Visual Studio updater. I don't know if the Mac version actually has that, but if you want to go back to Visual Studio for Mac here and do the download one more time, it's not going to re-download everything that you already have, but it's going to get you to that window where you get to choose what things you need. Like, are you doing Azure development? Are you doing desktop development? Are you doing game development, whatnot? So make sure you choose .NET MAUI. That's what makes the templates show up. So fire that installer up again, and hopefully it will install what you need. Oh, Ray is from Denver, Colorado. A little bit earlier in the morning for you. So good morning. Poland, nice to see. Miroslav, nice to see. Wyoming, even earlier, maybe the same zone as time zone as Denver. New York City, hello, Genevieve, that's my time zone. Billings, Montana, a lot of you from the mountain time. Florida, London, UK, hello, Gene. Italy, hey, good afternoon, good afternoon. Looks like, yes, Sherjil was asking about the recording. Yes, YouTube, it will be. Chat looks, oh, I see. So chat looks to be a little disabled, but so let's use the Q&A panel. At least I can see that, and we can go from there. Kentucky, I see, yeah, a lot of you from everywhere. Hong Kong, Denmark, Italy. Oh, I love that. I love that. See, technology brings us together sometimes when it works, right? Okay, cool. So let's use the Q&A panel, folks. I might have mistaken. I don't know why the chat is not working for you all, but the Q&A panel should be about the same. Yeah. And again, I am not going to type up the answers, because then only the person might get it. I will read out the questions so we can all tune in. So okay, Portugal, nice. Salt Lake City, Utah, Cleveland, Ohio. Mike Phillips, you are very close to me. I am in Erie, Pennsylvania, right across from the Ohio and Pennsylvania border. All right. Cool. Let's keep the question and answer panel going then, and I will get going. So again, I think we posted the Visual Studio bits again. I will, I will post this one more time if anybody wants. So this is the home page for MAUI. Let's see. If I do a chat, I think all of you get it, but maybe you don't get some of the Q&A things. So let's do the Q&A thing. Okay, so let's go back to what I was doing. And again, if you don't see the templates, run the installer one more time. Now, we're going to spend just 2 minutes trying to understand what exactly was done for us in this project, because it's interesting, some of the changes that have happened and some things that come kind of free for us. So if you have done any, if you have an experience doing any Xamarin development, this might feel a little different for you, because now it is truly a single project. In Xamarin or Xamarin Forms, we used to have one solution which had multiple projects for every platform that we're trying to hit. So iOS, Android, Windows, they will all get different projects. Now it's truly a single project. And all of your platforms are right here. It's a folder. So Android, iOS, Mac. I don't know how many people know about Tizen. That is the OS that Samsung makes that runs your televisions or refrigerators. So you can actually run .NET MAUI on your fridge, which is kind of weird, but it's cool that you can do that. So all of your platforms live right here. Now there are certain times where you do have to go in the platform folder, right? And ideally, you don't want to do a whole lot of platform specific things. because the whole point is to be cross-platform. But there are certain times where, in fact, we will do this today, when it comes to permissions, when it comes to how the app is bootstrapping itself on iOS or Android, there are certain times when you need to go into the platform-specific things. However, one of the big pain points for cross-platform development, there is no silver bullet, but there is quite a bit of help here already. One of my big pain points was managing all of the resources for each platform, right? So there are splash screens, there are icons, there are fonts, there are images, style sheets, whatever not, and those had to be replicated for each platform. And even worse, I had to have like separate NuGet packages. Now all of that is in one place, which is really nice. So there's a folder here called resources, and maybe I should bump up my fonts a little bit so you can all read better. There you go. Again, please let me know if I should make things any more bigger. So out here are my resources, which is one folder, and my icons, my fonts and images, everything is right there. So in terms of images in particular, if you give it a higher density image like a vector graphic like SVG, that's a high intensity, high fidelity image, and it's going to do its magic. There is a little thing called image resizetizer. So it's a mouthful, but that's built into MAUI. So you give it this one image, it's going to figure out what iOS needs, what Android needs, what Mac needs, and what Windows needs, and it's going to give you those exact dimensions. So you don't have to do everything. Sometimes if you give it a low resolution image, it cannot figure out all of it, and then you might want to still drop those images separately for iOS or Android, but otherwise this is really, really nice. And so if I go look at the CS Proj here, so this is what you get. So you'll notice there is a whole item group here, which has all of the shared things, my icons, my splash screens, my images, everything is right there, right? So, and you can add on more things here if you want, but essentially for images, what it's looking at is resources, images, star. This can sometimes get a little confusing. Again, tips as you go along. If you drop a lot of images in that image folder, ideally what should happen is each one of those images, if I right click on it and if I show you the build action, it is already marked to be MAUI image, right? So you can see that these are some specific things that they have named. So MAUI asset, MAUI CSS, MAUI fonts, MAUI image. So ideally every image that you just drop in that image folder, as long as you have this MAUI image include in the CS Proj, it should mark it as a MAUI image. But there are certain times, again, from experience, it gets a little confused, and then it complains about file types that are not matching. It complains about builds. So if you want, or if you are seeing any pain, you can actually mention that, hey, don't look at images WAC star, look at only like PNGs or look at only SVGs. So that way you're being very explicit that don't try image resization on everything, just do it on the ones that I want. Okay, let's see, any questions here from you all? Oh, India, hey, hello. San Diego, Poland, Sweden. This is wonderful. So nice to see all of you from all over the world. Okay. Ralph is asking, does the resource automatically apply to all different icons? Yes, absolutely. It is actually very good at that. iOS and Android, it will absolutely resize it. So Ralph, to answer your question in a little better way, here's what it's doing, right? So up on top, you have what's called this target frameworks, right? This is what's called an SDK style. It's a multi-targeted, project system. So in here are just comma separated identifiers for the platforms on which this is supposed to run. So iOS, Android, Mac Catalyst are given. If you're doing this on Windows, you have to do a little bit of this, hackish thing still, because the Windows 10 SDK or Windows 11 SDK and Win UI is getting some updates, so they kind of still have to have an explicit number. I think this will eventually go away and just be, .NET 7-Windows. But right now, you do have to specify that. But these are target frameworks, right? So hold on for a second. I do have another machine where I'm looking at this stuff, so that just went blank for a second. Okay, now it's back. These are, when I do a build, it's actually going to do a build for all of these things, right? So let's do a build here. So let's do a build of the solution. And you will notice that this is a new, brand new project. So it takes a little bit longer than usual for the first build because it's getting everything together. But right now, what it's doing is it's building the artifacts for iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows. Not Windows here since I'm on a Mac, but it will do the build for each platform. So if you have things that are specific to iOS, specific to Android, it actually looks in that folder, right in that platforms folder, and it's going to get what it needs for Android. It's going to get what it needs for iOS. So it's a complicated build, right? And you don't always have to do this, right? And this is a key tip that I keep saying, like if you're on command line, you can actually build for just one platform. Maybe as you're developing your app, maybe it's great that we can target all of these 4 platforms, but realistically we start out with one that we want to do well. Let's just say iOS, or let's just say Android or Mac. iOS and Mac are kind of similar, but when I am developing, I'm not testing my app on 4 different platforms every time I do a build. I'm likely doing it on one, and then once I'm in a happy place, once I know the app is working, then I will test on other platforms. So when you're doing your builds, this might be a good thing. Turn these things off, because you don't need to do the build for every platform. Like you see, like now the build is successful, but it took a minute, right? Because it did a build for Android, iOS, Windows, and Mac, and I don't need that. So turn it off if you don't want it, and then you can turn it back on once you're ready to test your apps across platforms. Okay, so that's a quick look at the project system. This is now truly a single project, and off we go. So let me know if there are any more questions on that front. Georgia, which is nice. So many people from all around the world. Settings.json is missing. It doesn't run on a Mac. I don't know, Shajal, if you might need to, because there is no settings.json in the project itself. If something is being, if it's complaining, might be time to maybe re-get the workload again, see if it does anything. Okay, so Jean is asking, if we remove the target frameworks that we do not need, would that speed up compilation? Are there any ways to speed up? Yeah, okay. Yes, so Jean, yes. If I, instead of going with 4 frameworks here, if I just say, just build me for iOS, it will speed up the build and the compilation. Here's the downside. You likely do not want to keep doing this forever, because you might inadvertently do something that is working only on iOS and then not working on Android or Windows. So now, hopefully, if you are staying within XAML and you're doing C#, if you're not doing anything platform specific, you should not have that problem. But once in a while, you might want to turn everything back on to make sure you can do a build for everything. But yes, it absolutely does, speed up. So let's see how we run this, right? So now it's multi-targeted, so it has all of these things in here. Now this might be just me. I am not a big Android person. I am in the Mac and the Apple and the iOS ecosystem, so I don't do a lot of builds for Android, but I mean it should be working the same way. So right here you see all of my Android devices. If you're doing Android, then go into the Manage Android Devices. If it's your first time, it's going to ask you to create the Android emulators, and that's kind of a VM. It's a little heavy sometimes, but what else do you do? You have to. So you can launch on Android. If you're on Windows, you will see Windows as an option. I don't, because I'm on a Mac right now, but I can take this same project, like envision this project, I can push this into GitHub, and then you and me can both work on it while you're on Windows, I'm on a Mac. It doesn't matter. It's the same exact project system. So let's run this on a Mac Catalyst, right? So I will hit start, and it should build and give me a Mac Catalyst project or app. Okay, so this is the Hello World app. Nothing, we have done nothing to it, and it's just a click event handler that tells you how many times you click. That's the .NET bot. That was an SVG, and it's the same SVGs that they share. So this is the Hello World experience on a Mac. So now it's a Mac desktop application. You can kind of see it running down in the corner. It has everything that a Mac desktop application should do. We can talk more about how you can customize things for desktop. You can have multiple window support. You can have like a menu up on the top. You can have context menus, right-click, tooltip. There are a lot of desktop-facing features that are kind of built in, but this is just the Hello World experience. Now, if I switch this up to notice how I have all of my iOS devices here, right? So I can choose an iPhone, I can choose an or an iPad. I can do all of that. And in fact, let's show you this here. So I am here. Let's do a clear just to show you another type of build, because sometimes Gene was asking if I should do a build for a specific platform. I do, but you don't have to. I think it speeds up a little bit. So let's go into my projects and let's find the project that we just did. It was called Maui Workshop, right? So let's go into Maui Workshop. Again, same project that I'm working on. I can just fire off a build differently. That's what I'm showing you. So here, let's see if it will remember any of my past commands. Maybe right here. So let's do this. So here I'm doing a .NET build, right? -t run, which I'm saying do a build and then fire off and run it actually. And then this is my -f means my target framework, and I'm specifically saying .NET 7 iOS. Now this corresponds to exactly this in the target framework, right? So I am explicitly saying don't do a build for everything, do a build just for iOS. That's all that I care about. So I hit enter and it fires off an MS build and it's doing a build, and at some point it says, hey, optimizing assemblies. So it actually did go to Xcode, do the build, and comes back with the default iOS simulator, which happens to be the iPad Pro on my machine. It might be something different on your machine. And you can actually change up which simulator that you're wanting to target. You can go to Xcode, look at all of your simulators, and each simulator has an ID. So you can say, do a build for iOS on this simulator. So that's how you can specify if you're doing command line. So it's taking a minute on the iPad to come up, but exactly same app, and it just works, right? So that's good. Now, this is again a command line thing. I think it works a little faster, but I can do the same thing. If I come down here and if I choose an iPhone Pro now, the choosing of the simulator gets to be a little easier if you're on Visual Studio. And let's fire this up. Same thing, same exact app. And this is the beauty of it. It truly is a cross-platform app. So you should see eventually the iOS simulator come up. There you go. So iPhone 14 Pro Max, same exact app. And again, it's the same exact style, same exact font, same exact images that are being used across platforms. So one of the things that you kind of missed it here on the iPhone one, you saw it on the iPad, is that splash screen, which is .NET, the purple thing. That is an SVG. So they're just catering it to whatever sizes that your app needs. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions. Yeah, Abhishek was asking, change it to that framework. Yes, exactly. That should be okay. So that way you're building it for just one if you wanted to. More people. Missouri, nice. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all the questions that you have. Let's see. Yeah, nothing else from you folks. So yeah, keep the questions coming. All right, so this is kind of hello world, right? So it works and we get it. So let's take a look at a little bit of how this is working. So when the app starts up, you start up like the first code, like the main program.cs type thing, that the code that's first executed is this. It's called Maui program.cs. So it's using what's called the .NET generic build host pattern. So it's trying to new up this thing called the builder, and it's going to this Maui app class and saying, hey, I need to start up this app, so give me all the things that it needs, right? So up front it says, hey, you need to use Maui app. That's a default thing, and then it configures a few fonts which you can totally change and make it your own. Debug, if you want to do some logging, you can, and so on, and then you return this builder, right? So that's how every Maui app starts up. And if you have done any Xamarin forms, you'll realize that this is different. This is not how Xamarin apps used to start up, but this is the way your Blazor apps, your .NET console apps, your WPF apps, this is the standard way all .NET apps start up now. So it's nice to see that they're just doing the default thing here. Now this builder here, we're not going to do it right now, but this actually has a little bit more benefits than just nearing up your app. This might be a little controversial based on who you speak to, but dependency injection, right? So it's a very common pattern. It's an inversion of control where you don't want to keep on newing up new things as you go along. Ideally, sometimes you want to have a single object that you use all throughout your app. Maybe you have some services that you want to swap out the implementation of the services based on how the app is running. So you don't have to new up those services. You can actually register those services right here with the builder and then get to use those services accordingly throughout your app. So we'll get to that in a bit, but dependency injection is now kind of built in. So this thing starts up, and then we go to this file called app.xaml, which has essentially any app-wide resources, any dictionaries, any styles that you might want to use. It's all up here. And then app.xaml.cs comes in and says, hey, I'm starting up this app. This is your app class, right? So this hangs around all throughout your life cycle, and it has this construct of a main page, which is the first view of your app, first page. And folks, by the way, you are home, so I am not pausing as I would do an in-person thing. So please go get a drink or do whatever you need to. If you need to run, I'm right here. This, by the way, is how it starts up. Now, it starts out here with the app shell, which again, you don't have to use it. It's a additional thing. So what they're trying to point you is, let's go to the docs. And the docs, by the way, are very, very nicely written now. The community has helped a lot. So most of the things that were common from Xamarin Forms has now been brought over. So again, it has a lot. So overview. XAML is the visual markup tree that you commonly use to build your apps. Again, you don't have to use it. If you don't like it, you can do all C# if you want. Platform integrations, we'll talk about this a lot more because it is a native app, so you can go into very deep platform integrations. It talks about the fundamentals and how to get started. There is a lot of stuff in here already. So what it's trying to tell you is, if you go into the get started, see how it talks about how to build with CLI, how to pair with the Mac and all that stuff. If you're on Windows, this is what you might have to do. So you have to have a Mac of some sort somewhere in the network or in the cloud or on the internet, and you need to be able to reach that Mac from your Windows machine. There is this little pair button, and you pair your Mac with your Windows, and then you can do F5. As long as you can get to the Mac, you may have to give it the credentials, then it fires off the build, comes back. And actually, for you to deploy the app on Windows, you actually don't ever have to look at a Mac if you don't want to. I don't know if you would hate a Mac so much. I go both ways. I use Windows and Mac all over the time, everywhere. I love them both. But if you just don't want to look at a Mac, there is a remote iOS simulator built in, which is essentially the same iOS simulator, just shown on your Windows machine with a black shell. But the benefit might be like Macs don't have touchscreens, but if your Windows machine has a touchscreen, then you can touch to hit a target. You can pinch and zoom if you want. So all of those things are nicely done. Now, as you are beginning, let's see, where's the shell? So this is the shell thing that they're talking about. When the app starts up, notice how it says new app shell. This is the shell that they're talking about, right? So this was, again, a little controversial, but now this is the default, but they're not forcing you into using this. You totally don't have to if you don't want to. So normally, .NET MAUI apps are made up of multiple screens, right? Every view is a screen that the user sees, and you might have multiple screens that make up your app. And you might want to have navigation in between those screens. And how do you present those screens? There are multiple ways. You can have tabs at the bottom. This one here has like flyouts with the hamburger menu, and then navigation between the screens. All of that is kind of built in if you want to use the shell. But again, if you don't care for it, then don't use it. It's up to you. This one here is newing up the shell. So if I go to the app shell here, this XAML just says one thing, shell content, and it's pointing to a main page, and that's about it. And shell XAML doesn't really have anything. So if I, for example, did not want to use the shell, I could switch this up to say, go new up the main page directly. And I think it should work the same way. Let's go back to Mac and do a build. Let's make sure I didn't break anything. But again, the shell is when you have multiple views and you just want to, utilize the navigation that's built in. All right, so I didn't break anything. It still works. It misses some of the, the default MAUI thing at the top, but that's fine. I can still do that. So let's go back to using the shell because it gives you a few nice things anyways. All right, so that's my shell, and that's how things start up. Now here's where, oh, and this, by the way, is XAML. This is the main page.xaml. This is why you see that .NET bot, that's an image, and you see some labels, and you see some buttons. That's how it's all wired up. And there's a main page XAML.cs, which is essentially the code behind. So when I click on that counter, that's how the increment counter works. All right, let's take a quick look at the Q&A panel. Gene is saying I need to buy a Mac. Macs are nice, but they're expensive. So yes and no. You don't always have to buy a Mac. There are services like macinthecloud.com, which will do a build for you. So it's up to you. Peter is asking about recording. Yes, yes. It's late in Denmark. Yes, I hope you've had dinner and you can settle in with a beverage or a dessert of your choice. Oh, so Mark Watkins is asking, do you recommend using Prism? Okay. I have thoughts, and please keep in mind these are my thoughts. So what Mark is asking is this pattern, right? So if I go to look up, if I can type MVVM, this is a design pattern, right? So for XAML and C# based code bases, which is what we are doing here until we bring in Blazor, this is a pattern that has always been very, very popular because it absolutely works very nicely. So you want to have a little bit of separation of concerns. You don't want to have a code behind and your business logic and your UI logic all stuck up together. It's not good for testing. So the MVVM pattern says, let's differentiate, and we can actually do some of this today. So you will have a model, which is essentially a kind of a replica of the data that you're working with, maybe on a per view basis or maybe on a global basis. And then you have a view model, which is kind of the orchestrator that takes the data, renders it. If there is an update the user is doing, brings it back, and so on. And the view is what you're looking at, the view. And it can be a combination of multiple views and so on. So there's data binding that's built in. There is updates that are built in. So MVVM design pattern absolutely works, and a lot of it is actually baked right inside of dotnet MAUI. So things like navigation, things like data binding, it's built in. So to answer Mark's question, you don't have to use a different framework, but if you wanted to, especially if you are on a big team, there are certain things that are not built in, even with MVVM on dotnet MAUI. Things like factory patterns, things like how you choose your view models, that type of a thing is not built in, and the navigation that's built in is kind of a little basic. So if you are in a team and if you are realizing that you need to refactor your code base to make things easier for anyone, then you should go look at some MVVM frameworks. There are quite a few of them. Mark was asking about Prism, which is very popular. It's maintained by two of my very good friends, actually. So yes, that works with dotnet MAUI. Another thing to look at is there's this thing called .NET Community Toolkit. So this is relatively new. Well, it's not new if you are in the Windows space. This has been around. They have actually made this a .NET wide toolkit. It's an extra NuGet package. But if you're looking for MVVM in particular, you might folks might remember there was a thing called MVVM Lite, again maintained by a good friend of mine, Laurent. So that MVVM Lite is now baked into this. It's called the MVVM Toolkit, and it's kind of part of the Community Toolkit. So things like observable patterns, things like data binding and their way of doing navigation, it's all built in. So there's a lot of help. So my advice is don't jump into it until you feel a need for it. There is absolutely a place for this, but make sure you know what you're doing, and then off you go. Sorry, my answers are long and rambling. I'm an old man. I like to talk, but I'm a little introvert with other people. Like I don't do small talk, but I talk with my folks, like you are. So that's a quick look at MVVM. So let's go back to our app here. So I got my XAML code behind and everything is working. Let's do some stuff here, right? So this is nice. Notice that it's some things like semantic properties. Those are now built in. Those are great for screen readers if you are wanting to support accessibility, which you should. So all of that stuff is now built in. Now, how about we do something a little real? So here's what I'm thinking, and you can do whatever comes to your heart, but let's do kind of a little bit of a hello world. Let's try to go to a cloud resource or a service and just pull down some data, see how real world Maui development looks like. What are some things to look at? So you can go to any API of your choice if you want to just pull down some data. If you have a SQL server, you have a service exposed, great, bring that in. This is what I'm going to use because it's free, and so I'm going to go ahead and post this in the chat. So that's what I'm using. This is a wonderful, sample API. It's called JSON placeholder, and it's a RESTful service. So REST is a pattern that lets us do updates and deletes on our data. So it supports CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete, and it will do all of those operations for you, but not save the state for too long because it's it's a showcase type thing. But they have lots of resources, like they have posts and comments and albums. All of these are RESTful endpoints, and they should show you how to do a get and a put and a post. It's really fun to just play around. So if I look at the posts here, it's too small. Let's make this bigger. So this is what's called JSON, right? So JavaScript object notation, very popular pattern for us to exchange information over the web and make that thing truly flexible across platforms. So this is in JSON. So you see that one bracket in which one parenthesis, maybe that includes all of these JSON objects, right? So each one of these is a JSON object. It has user ID, title, body, whatnot. And this is in Latin, by the way, which makes it a little funny. But this is our sample data. You get like 100 posts. If you make a request, you can ask for one post if you want. So if I can do like posts and then one, I will only get one, or I can ask for 50, whatnot. So that's my sample data, right? So if I had to bring this over into my app, what do I do? So let's go look at some stuff here. So first thing is, I would again, in a real world, you would want to make this nicely organized, but just for this demo, I'm going to keep it fairly simple here. So first thing is, I would add a folder here, and let's call this models. Right. So this is my data essentially is what I'm trying to add. So let's add a new class, and empty class is fine. Let's just call it post, right? Because I'm trying to bring a set of posts back. Now, this is maybe something a little new. Sam, oh, hi Sam, I'm a Sam too. When building for Windows, is it possible to access the C# code using HTTP requests? I'm not entirely following, but it shouldn't be any different for Windows versus Mac. It's all the same. And yes, it's all powered by C#. Ray is asking, is binding property change work the same way as Xamarin Forms? Yes, yeah, absolutely. So what's being asked here is, we'll do some data binding, but anytime you have an object or a collection of objects that you're binding to the UI, that's a two-way data binding. So anything changes on the object model, you don't need to refresh, it just updates the UI, and the other way around as well. So binding property context, all of that is the same exact thing. Okay, so we can keep going. Now, this is something relatively new. Again, you don't have to use it, but we are in a new .NET, right? I'm running this on .NET 7, so I have access to C# 11 because that's what this new project is. Again, if you're doing C# 10, that's fine too. It's just a matter of syntax, and it's nice. So notice how I can do this thing here, like a file scope namespace. So one less indentation for me, which is nice. Ooh, why is it complaining so much? What did I do to make it complain? Should be the same. All right. I just don't want to have this models thing. I would just rather call it Maui Workshop. And I should be able to get rid of this. Why is it complaining? There you go. Visual Studio got a little confused maybe. Come back here. Oh, I didn't close it. That's why it was getting confused. So this is essentially what's called a file scope namespace. So I don't need to include that as one more indentation. That's my namespace for the whole app, right? So here's my public class. It might be good to call it partial if I needed to. I don't think I need a constructor, but let's do some properties so we can bring things down. So public int, let's say I had a user ID, and we're going to say get and set, right? Nothing unusual about it. Now let's repeat this a few times because our JSON had user ID, ID, title, and body. So let's do that. So let's call this ID, and this one was title, and I cannot spell, and this one was body. If you folks have your own API, please go ahead and do that if you wanted to. I'm just using a free API. Now I will do one more thing here that may be unique, and this may be just me being a little paranoid about things not working, but let's do this. JSON property name. It's not identifying what this is, but we'll figure that out real quick because I think this was camel cased. So JSON property name, it doesn't understand what that is. Can you give me a thing to fix? There it is, there's the bubble. Using text JSON serialization. So I'm using the serialization that is built inside of .NET. So I don't need Newtonsoft or anything else like that. So I'm just using that. So what I'm doing here with this JSON property is I'm marrying it up to exactly what the name is on the JSON object, right? So when this whole data comes down into my app, I don't need to remap things. I'm just being very explicit that this is what the data is. So might as well call yourself that if you want. So let's do that, and let's do that. So this was just called ID, I think. Yep, that's ID. This one was just called title, and then this one was called body, right? So now we have a business object. It's a plain C# object. That's a representation of what my data would be like, right? So that's good to know. All right. Now let's go over to your Q&A one more time. Ralph is asking regarding data binding, do I still have to implement the whole notified property change? No, no, you don't have to, because some of it is built in. And especially if you're using an MVVM pattern or the Community Toolkit, you have observable collections that are built in, so you don't have to. And then this is exactly what they're trying to have you avoid, not write so much a boilerplate code. So what Ralph is asking is, let's say I have a collection of these posts, and if the user ID changes or the user changes that user ID, I would have to do some rebinding. I would have to make sure that there's a interface called iNotify property change. So anytime something changes, you want that event to be bubbling up so that the UI knows about it. So all of that is boilerplate code, so you don't have to do that anymore. So yeah, good question, Ralph. Title, yes, you are right. Oh, thank you, Christian, for pointing that out, because it's going to bark at me. That's a string, and in JavaScript gets a little finicky about strings and ID integers. So thank you for that, Christian. Appreciate, because it'll blow up my code in just a second. Thank you. And Jake also pointed out the same thing. What else? Yeah, I think that's all the Q&A for now. Okay, so that's my post. Now let's write a view model. And again, I'm just doing a very base level MVVM pattern here, but you can see how, oops, no, I don't want the existing folder. You can see how you can start setting up your code base to do stuff like this. So let's add a new folder. We're going to call this view models. And in my folder, I'm going to add a new class. And let's just call this post list view model. Okay. Yeah, great. All right. Same thing. I don't want that view models thing hanging off. I will just have Maui workshop. Oh, notice how I can just do a semicolon and then it just automatically takes away the curly braces, which is nice. Okay. So I have a view model here, and again, the view model should be the one responsible for taking stuff from the model, building up anything that your view needs, and then serving it up to the view, and bringing things back if you need to. Okay, I might want to make this partial if I need to, if it's been put together by, and then the partial thing is very useful for the actual page, because notice how you have some XAML here, and then you have a code behind. So at compilation time, it actually puts the XAML and the code together. So that's why this needs to be a partial class. The other things, not so much. But notice how the X class is referring to the main page, which is actually the code behind class is what it's referring to. Now, this content page is an interface. It's a sub thing of how you lay out your visual tree, because you may not want to do a content page all the time. So let's go to dotnet MAUI. What I'm trying to show you is we should keep the docs open. If I look at my user interface, you have a lot of different things. These are too small. Okay, I got animations, brushes, control, blah, blah, blah. If I go down here to controls, and if I look at all of this, I got layouts, I got pages, and so on. So layouts are ways in which how you structure your visual tree. So you can do a grid layout, you can do a stack layout, absolute layout. All of those are essentially container controls. And the pages are of a few types as well. This is the content page that we are using, right? So content page, flyout navigation. You can do a flyout page by default, or you can do a tabbed page. So these are different ways in which you can do a page. So it doesn't always need to be a content page. And then the views here define all of the controls and all of the actual UI components that you have at your disposal to do stuff, right? So I can present my data in a variety of different ways. I can manipulate my data. All of that is nicely documented up here. Okay, so let's build up a post view model, right? So any more questions from you? Let's see. Sam is asking, we are building an app using Blazor for web as a standalone Windows app. Oh, that's your question. Can I get to your question in just a bit, Sam? Because like the Blazor thing, I do want to get to it, and maybe I can answer your question then. Okay, so nothing else from you folks right now. All right, let's build this thing up. So first thing is I want to have a collection of a list of posts that I want to bring back, right? So let's do a list, and so C# generic of the type post, right? So that works, and we're going to call this post items, and let's do a get, and I don't want this to be set by somebody else. It's a private set, right? All right, so that's my collection. So essentially, the view is going to use this collection to look this thing up. Now let's do a private constant if I wanted to, string of let's just say rest URL, equals, and here's my thing, and let's go copy that URL. This post. So I want to go to that URL. So I'm trying to consume a RESTful service. That's my endpoint. All right, and now for me to do a lookup, I do need an HTTP client, right? So let's do that. We're just going to call it HTTP client. There, and I think that's all. That's all I should need just to get a client. Now, I don't need a constructor for this because it should be default what I'm doing, but let's do a public method here. So now this is where I'm going to use async and await because it's a web service call and I don't want to lock up my UI thread. So notice the async and await that I will use. So async, and this has to return a task of the type list of posts, right? Post, there you go. So I want you to return this task, and let's just call it get posts, maybe. Right, that, and now we define our function. So essentially the view model is the one who is going to make the service call out to go get my data from the RESTful endpoint. And again, it may be something that's debatable whether you want to do this code in your view model. Maybe you want to have a data service, which is one more level of abstraction. So the view model can only be doing its views and doing the interactions with the view. So just for for this purposes, we are just using this simple thing here. Let's new up this collection that we just have, and then we will return that post items collection, right? That's our goal. So we're going to return this, but we will need to new up a few more things. So HTTP client, let's new that up so we can make a service call out, and it needs a URI. So let's do a URI, whatever, let's just call it post list URI equals new URI of the type, I think it's a string dot format of, I think it needs the REST URL, yep. And what's the other parameter? An argument. We don't have any arguments, so string dot empty. What? Oh, I did a comma. String dot empty. All right, here's my URI. So that's what I want to go to, because it just the HTTP client needs a URI. So HTTP response message, that's fine, is going to be, let's just call it response equals, we are going to do an await here, because I am awaiting on this task. I'll explain what this is doing in just a second as well, a little bit more. And we want to do a get, right? We will do a get on the whole URI that we just built up. So post list URI, right? So essentially what we're saying is go to that endpoint with that URI and do a get on HTTP get on the full list of all the posts that are coming out. And now once we have done that, we can say if my response, I think there's a status, what is it called? I'm forgetting, is success. Yeah, is success status code, which means like it's not a 404 or 200, something like that. So now we have a response. So let's do post items equals. Now we are going to now depend on the JSON deserialization to work out the way it is. So we'll do an await, and we'll say response dot it's called content of the response, because that's the body of the response, and then read from JSON. Where is that? Maybe it's not in here. Read from JSON async, I think. Why is it not there? Am I missing? Give me a thing to fix. Oh, there is my bubble. System.net HTTP JSON. Okay, let's add that. So now I have read from JSON async, and I will try to read a list of posts of the type post. So I'm giving it a certain type. Oh, I didn't close it. And after this, oh wait, this is not right. List of the type post that, maybe. No, wait, I didn't need a thing here. Just need a list. I'm looking at this code that I have written in the past, but what am I missing? List of the type post. There, I think. No. What do you not like? Cannot await a method group. Yeah, I'm trying to read from JSON. I didn't close it. Oh, there it is. Now it is good. Okay. Essentially we are tapping into the system.net HTTP JSON, and we're saying, hey, we are bringing some JSON data back from this, and this is my HTTP client. So I'm newing up the client, and I'm building up a URI. I'm going to that REST URL, no arguments that I'm passing in. I'm getting the response HTTP client, and then we are doing a get async on the whole thing. If there is success, then I want you to rehydrate my post items, which is right now empty, with a collection of all the things that I'm getting back. So have I messed anything up here? Let's do a build. And in the meantime, I will go check on any Q&A. Hello, Andrej. Ray in the chat room is asking a good question here. What is the difference between the stack layout and the horizontal stack versus vertical stack, which are directional specific? Yes, so that is a very, very good point. So Ray is asking about how you lay down your controls, right? So if I go back to the code base here, so if I go look at, I think it was in the layouts, right? Stack layout. Okay, so this stack layout is how you stack things in your visual UI tree, right? That's how you stack them either vertically or horizontally, and then you have width and dimensions, and then it kind of floats and wraps around and so on. So this stack layout is a thing that Xamarin Forms used to have, right? And you can still use it, but you're actually suggested that you don't, because these two things are kind of new. So there is now a horizontal stack layout, right, which is essentially just laying things. To have an example, like laying things down horizontally, nesting things, you can do that. And then there is a vertical stack layout, right? So this one is just vertically layering things. Now, so what Ray is asking is, if I do a stack layout and if I do, I think it's called orientation, right? Yeah, so it's called orientation, and you can set the orientation property to horizontal or vertical, and it'll do the exact same thing. However, you are suggested that you use the horizontal or vertical stack layout if you know the orientation beforehand, because those are new. Those are new handlers in .NET MAUI, so they're a little bit more performant than it used to be with stack layouts in Xamarin Forms. So if you can specify a horizontal or a vertical, and most times we know what we're trying to do, so use the vertical or the horizontal instead of changing the orientation on the fly. All right, so this thing so far builds, and we just have a view model that can go out and make a call. We're trying to do a hello world. If anyone's joining late, we're just trying to do a hello world .NET MAUI app and see how we can display some data coming down from the cloud. Okay, nothing else in the Q&A, so I'll keep on going. So let's look at our main page, right? So right now it has a whole bunch of XAML that has rendering just the base, view of it, the hello world templated view of it. So we don't want that. We want our own thing. So let's get rid of this whole thing. And notice, by the way, this is using the vertical stack layout, Ray. So they are using the vertical stack layout because they know that they're rendering it vertically or horizontally. So if you can use the vertical or the horizontal, it's a little bit better performing than the other ones. Okay. So let's look at this one here. Namespace, MAUI workshop, that's good. But I don't need to click event handler anymore because I just took out the button. So this is all empty, right? So now we are bringing back a collection of posts, right? From our RESTful endpoint, which is, where's my browser? Which is this collection, right? So there are multiple ways in which you can show a collection of things. In fact, it's one of the most common things that mobile or desktop apps end up doing, showing a collection of things. So if you go look at the views here, there is present data. The BlazorWebView, don't go into that just yet because we'll look at that with Blazor. But any of the other ones, they're all there for presenting data or a collection of things, right? So you can use grids, you can use list views, and those are actually in the where is that present data? Let's look at where are the views? Label map, shapes, web view. Where's the collection view? Let's do a search. And it was somewhere in here, like collection view. This is a very common way. So it was, where was it under? Oh, display collections. I think I was looking at present data. So there is a collection view, there is a carousel view, there is a list view, and so on. So some of this is kind of built into .NET MAUI. So if you want, pick your favorite control to show the collection of things here. What I'm going to do is choose something that we make, because I know that it does a few things that I really like. And again, so you totally don't have to, but I'm just trying to show you what I normally would do. So if I head out to Telerik.com, and again, I'm biased because I obviously work for Progress in Telerik. We make UI components for .NET and for JavaScript. and we make network debugging tools. So we do a lot of things for web. We do JavaScript controls and components. We do all things ASP.NET, from Ajax to MVC to Razor to Blazor. We do Kendo UI for jQuery, Angular, React, Vue, all the things. We still have a Xamarin suite, and we have a brand new MAUI suite, which I'll get into. But if you're doing desktop apps, then MAUI, WinForms, WinUI, WPF, UWP, we got UI for everything. And then if you're doing reporting, you're doing testing, Fiddler, I absolutely love Fiddler. I don't know if any of you have used Fiddler. This is what I use for all things network, so I'm never in doubt as to what's going on in my network, especially when I'm making API calls. Browser dev tools have come a long way, but this is for desktop apps and mobile apps, and for gRPC, for real-time web sockets connections. So I'm really big fan of Fiddler. Anyways, but let's go back to .NET MAUI here. So this is our UI suite for all things MAUI. It has a lot of things that enterprises or polished apps would need, like data controls, data visualizations, charts, a variety, 24 types of charts and graphs, and different types of UI editors and content editors, navigations, interactivity, all of that is built in. So I actually want to go use maybe the list view, or maybe even the data grid in this case, because I am bringing in something that's columns and rows of data. So I want to bring that in. So if you are new to this, if you want to just follow along with what I'm doing, you can hit this big try now, unless you already have a Telerik subscription. If you hit that try now, it's going to give you an installer, and once you install, it actually installs the bits for you. So let me show you what that looks like. Let me maximize this. If I go into my documents, and if I show you my progress, that's Telerik UI for .NET MAUI 5.1.0. We have had a long journey from 0.0.1 with my early preview days. 1.0 was when .NET MAUI first hit GA, and now we have come up to 5.0, which works with .NET 7. We're already looking at .NET 8 stuff. So in here, you get some binaries, which are for .NET 6 and 7. You get some NuGet packages. So this is the nupkeg file, as we call it. That's the thing that you want to add a reference to, and then you get some really nice examples. Like I love our control samples, which is a app that shows all of the controls in one place. There's a CryptoTracker app. There's an SDK browser app that shows you different ways of doing things. So all of it is right there. And once you download, or if you have never had an email with us, you can just sign up for that. Once you download, all of this becomes very easy. So you can go in here into the packages and just grab that NuGet package, or there's already a feed for this. So in my Visual Studio, if I do look at my preferences and my NuGet sources, you will see that I have two sources. I have a NuGet feed, and I have a Telerik NuGet feed, which is pointing to NuGet.Telerik v3 index.json. That's a hosted NuGet feed, so I can get my stuff easier. So I don't ever have to go through installers. I know how to get my stuff easier. So again, you can point to this from your local NuGet package, or once you sign up, you can also reach it through NuGet. So let's bring that in. So I'm going to go manage NuGet packages, and again, you don't need to do this. If you don't want, you can also grab the collection view, or you can grab the list view that's built into MAUI. I am just going to use the grid, which I really like. So here's my Telerik UI for .NET MAUI app package, 5.0 stable. Sure. You can also do pre-release if you want. Stay on the cutting edge. Add that package, and now it's done. Accept that license, and it's all done. However, I think I need to do one quick thing here. That's an extension method. So let's look up our docs and this, and let's go into the controls, and I want the data grid. Getting started. So here's the data grid that I want. It's saying, hey, you need to do a few things here. In particular, if I need to go into my MAUI program and just use Telerik as an extension method. So .use Telerik, that, and it's giving me the squigglies. Give me the light bulb. No, there it is. I don't know how to make it come up any quicker. Okay, using MAUI compatibility. So essentially what this does, it has no meaning for the grid because it's a native handler. There are a couple of charts and graphs where we use some custom renderers. So those are working in compatibility mode in .NET MAUI, but you still kind of have to do it for every type of UI. So just one extension method, use Telerik, that brings it in. That's all we need. So with that, I'm going to go into my main page.xaml, and this was empty. And and by the way, this is the docs site. If you go to docs.telerik.com, and then you can drill down into whichever product that you want to see the docs for. So I want to grab this XML namespace, which is that. So I literally just copied and pasted from the docs here, and then I want this rad data grid. So everything is RAD. RAD stands for Rapid Application Development. Most of our components have that RAD in front of it, just because it's fun. So let's just call this post list grid. Okay, so just one UI. Content page takes just one UI. Okay, let's see if you have any questions in the chat room. David is asking, could you please spend some time on the web view? Yeah. I would love to, David. So yes, so David is talking about how the BlazorWebView is built in. However, you don't always want to use that because if you have web components that are built with React or Vue.js or Angular, those are also welcome. So David, can you give me maybe another 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes, so we can wrap up the XAML C# and then we'll get to some of the Blazor stuff. Matthews, if I'm saying that right, could you further, will there be a further webinar for porting Xamarin apps to MAUI? Okay, that is a very good idea. So yes, I can definitely do that. By the way, we have this thing called blogs.telerik.com, and in there we wrote a whole series on migrating from Xamarin to MAUI. And there is a lot of guidance already from Microsoft. There are tools like the .NET Upgrade Assistant that will go from Xamarin to MAUI. It doesn't do everything under the sun. Some things are a little bit manual, but there is a lot of help already. But I think, Matthews, that's a really good idea. We would love to be able to maybe do one workshop where we take a Xamarin Forms app that's not a hello world type thing, a real app, and then just in 1 hour try to migrate and see how far we get. There are, it depends a little bit on your NuGet packages. Sometimes you may not have all of it for .NET 6 or 7, but as long as you can get past that, it should not be a very difficult migration. But there is a lot of guidance already, Matthews, so please take a look. Okay, so, and yes, I will get to the web view stuff, the web stuff in just a minute. Let's get this one to work. All right, so I have a grid. I'm not mentioning any columns, any of that yet, but I do have this post now, which mimics my service. And I have a view model that is set up, and I am set up with MAUI program.cs as well. Okay, so now let's do something here in my main page.xaml. Let's see, we want to be able to get to that view model, right? So let's first create that view model. What did we call it? Post list view model. Let's just call it my view model, and maybe I will show you a little bit of dependency injection on how we do this, but let's just get it to work first, like happy path first, right? All right, so when we initialize this, main page comes together, that's fine. We're going to say my view model equals new post list view model. So I have this view model ready, so I can make that call. Now, when exactly do we make that call? So we have this get posts that's just sitting there waiting to make an HTTP call, but the when matters a little bit because we want this to be truly async all the way down, right? So this is an async, and I have an await here for it to go get the HTTP call, make the HTTP call, get the bits, and then I have an await here for it to be deserialized, but I do want to make that on a await all the way from my UI. So there are multiple things you can do. There is an on navigated to event, but I kind of like using the on appearing. This is an event that is fired when the page is just getting ready to render, right? So you're just tapping into the on appearing and saying, let's tap into just as you're getting ready. So the main page here, this is a constructor. This is to kind of new up and hydrate the objects to be ready to render the main page. If you make that an async, you sometimes get into a little bit of a trouble. So it's better to just kind of tap into like, let the object initialize and then you can get to your stuff, right? So I want to make this an async because I want to actually do stuff here on appearing. All right, so let's do this. Let's do my grid. What did I call my grid? Post list grid. Okay, this dot post list grid. I'm not sure why it's not recognizing it, but I want to set the item source on that. So item source is essentially, a way to data bind. So it just, I can mention all the columns, or I can just set one object, and I can do it with like binding context as well, where I can mention the item source in the XAML. So there are multiple ways of, doing this. But let's again do the happy path first. Let's do an await here, and here is where I'm going to do my view model dot get. Where's my get posts? There it is. Get posts, right? Get posts that, and that should be it. Now it's not liking my post list grid. It sure does contain a post list grid. You're just not liking this. Okay, let's do a build. Let's see what we broke. Okay. It's still not liking the post list grid. Why? Oh, I'm missing a, no, that's a generate. Why do you not like my grid? Show potential fixes. No. It is called a post list grid. It is not liking my grid for some reason. Sometimes Visual Studio will act up and fix itself. Sometimes it won't. Let's do a clean. Let's do a rebuild. It is really not liking something here. Let's see, chat room. Oh, Stefano is asking, yes, about SQLite. Stefano, let me get back to you in just a second. I can show you an example of using SQLite on some data and how you store it locally. But would be nice to see this working. Let's see, did I miss something that it's not working for some reason? Let's rename it my data grid. All right. It just does not like my data grid for some reason. Can I run this? It might fail totally. Yeah. Item source. It doesn't like my item source now. What am I missing? All right, I'm going to close and come back and see if it fixes itself. See, Visual Studio it's also Thursday for Visual Studio. It sometimes just doesn't like. So now it likes my data grid. Okay. What was the complaining about? Item source. There you go. So exactly the same code. Now it compiles because Visual Studio was getting a little confused. Okay, so we are doing the on appearing, and we are setting the data grid's item source property, which is essentially the collection of what it's bound to, the collection. And this get posts is going to return an awaitable task of the type list, and that's going to be bound here. So are we good? Are we good to go? Let's do, yeah, before we try this out, let's put a breakpoint there, and let's run this in debug mode and see if we are making the call correctly. Hello world, right? Just to get things on pull down some cloud data and just get things on screen. How difficult can it be? But it can be difficult. Okay, here's my HTTP response. Okay, I got some HTTP response. Is status code is true, so we are good on that front. All right, let's step over that. Here's my post items. I'm reading that from JSON and it's await. That's fine. And do we have a collection? Oh, there it is. See, I have a collection of 100 posts. Yay! So it did hydrate, and it's giving me back this set of posts here. Let's step over that. So here's my post items collection, which is now just a list of 100 things. Let's go play, hit play, and then yay! All right, there we go. Just a hello world to get some data from the cloud down to our app, and now we have a list of things. So now this is a great, this has 100 things, and I think the user ID is meant to stand for like who is making the post, and the ID stands for like what the post is about, and then there are some comments or titles or body on it. Oh, this dragging a column, like this is for you to group things, but you can actually turn this off, I think. Hold on, let me turn that off. So I think that is what is it called, like user, no, not edit mode, because then you can actually do that grouping on desktop and then turn it off on mobile if you wanted to. What's it called, user group mode? And I can just say, so when I say auto, it actually does it for desktop, but then it doesn't do it for mobile. But let's just disable it for now. And then let's look at the view model again. All of this is fine. Returning items is fine. So we are reaching out, deserializing it. Notice how the JSON async actually does deserialize it correctly. And I don't think you need to mention all of these JSON properties. You can, there's a serializer property where you could say, just give me camel case. So assume that when I say user ID, assume that it's user ID in camel case, and then so on. So let's see this working one more time. Debug. And then hopefully, if you have been following along, you are getting to the same results as I am. Okay, there we go. So now we have all of this data coming down, which is nice. And since I put a grid in, I have some extra things like I can filter. Notice how I can filter by, just give me the user ID 1, right? So if I do a filter, then the data is still there. It's just hidden from view because I'm looking at user ID 1 and so on. And then I can reset the filter, and then everything comes back. I can do filters from other things. Check this out. I can also move things around. So this is my body, and I can sort. Notice how I am sorting the up and the down arrow, and then I can click on that, and I can move this column over to here. That didn't work. Like there, maybe. There. So the body and the title are now flipped, right? So it's a full-featured grid, and if you are using a grid on a desktop device, your users might have a lot of needs about sorting, filtering, grouping, and all types of things. It's nicely built in. And now one thing we are not doing is something we should do is making sure, well, first is this one here. There is no try catch. There is nothing else on it. In a real world, you would want to do a try catch on it. But one thing I would like to do is whenever we are actually going off and getting some data, it might take a while, right? So I like using some sort of a progress bar. So I'm going to use our busy indicator here, which again, you don't have to, but it's nice and pretty useful. And there's a kind of a activity indicator built into MAUI as well. So what this one does here is just says, hey, I'm a busy indicator, and normally I would have my busy indicators on, but if you're done with it, then you can set the content part, which is where the actual content is going to show up. So let's go do that really quickly. I'm going to go into my main page. And we're going to paste this whole thing that we got from our documentation. So let's move this thing around a little bit. So if you're following along, I'm just copying and pasting code from the docs. All right, so red busy indicator name is defined. Let's just say post list busy indicator. Okay, I don't need the automation ID. That's for testing. And I will take this entire grid that we just did and put this here instead of that label that says this is the content when it's done. delete that and put that instead. So essentially this is pretty simple, and actually let's go change what that looks like, because it has a few animations built in. So notice these animations here, like that's just an enumeration of how to control it. I like this animation 8, so I think there is a what is it, animation type property, and I can set that to any of these numbers. Let's call it animation 8. Now notice what we're doing here. We are saying is busy is true, which means the busy indicator is set to true, and it'll just keep on staying that way. So let's see if this will work. Do a debug. Okay, yeah. Well, it does not work, but it kind of proves the point. So by default, that is the whole UI, right? So it's showing this busy indicator, but we did the fetch. We never set the fact that it's done, right? So we forgot that part. So we can come down here, and once we're in on pairing, once we set the item source, what we can do is, what do we call it? Post list busy indicator. Okay, let's see if Visual Studio catches up this time. This dot post list busy indicator. Now it figures it out. Is busy is false. Okay, that's it. So we are making sure that we have the data. We have bound it to my data grid, and then we are going to set that to false. Now this is a very quick thing, and it might actually be like cached, so you might not see it, but let's just see. But you should see, ideally, the busy list indicator come up once, and then, where did that go? Oh, it's too quick. So, I mean, had this been a longer call, let's say instead of 100 items, we are fetching, 100,000 items, which you should not. But if you were fetching something big, then you will see the indicator, and then once it's done, then we are swapping it over to actually show you the grid. And that, excuse me, that's kind of built in as well. It's called, what is it called? Data virtualization. Like load on demand, virtualization, those things are nicely built in, and you can style them however you want. Yeah, this is the load on demand thing. If you are, really needing to bring down a huge amount of data set and then bind it to the grid, it should still scroll, seamlessly. Just because you're binding it to a big collection, it shouldn't stop. So, all right, we have kind of a hello world type thing going here. Excuse me, folks. Let's look at your Q&A. Oh, a lot of questions. Binding expression, we can do that. Krupa Shankar was working along. Apparently, it worked when you removed the this and then added back on. Okay, yep, that's good. Let's code one more thing, and then I will like to switch to Blazor. Okay, so give me a second here. One thing to keep in mind, and I know there was a question about SQLite, which was also fun to get to. One thing we should do is, if I go look at the docs here, okay, so platform, this talks about the different types of integrations, right? Platform integrations. So application model, communications, device features. So every type of sensor that you have on the device, you can get to it from dotnet MAUI, because it's abstracted away, C# code. You don't need to worry about how iOS works or how Android works. It just works with C# code. So we are making a HTTP call here to go get the RESTful endpoint, but we are not checking whether we should be able to make that call or not. So I always like checking, and this is showing you a little bit of the platform integration, is do I even have network connection to do this? So let's look at communications, networking. So connectivity, right? So I like using this because it is a way of you to check whether you have internet or not. So let's just use that really quick. I'm going to copy that whole thing over, and this probably doesn't belong in the view, but I will just do it right here. On appearing, let's do that. So notice how easy it is. Like network access, that's a dotnet MAUI networking class, and within that there is a connectivity class that tells you, and this will tell you if your user is on 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, whatever is the network type, right? So it's really nicely abstracted out, and this access type of internet says that you have some sort of a connection, right? So ideally, we will want to check on that before we make that call. Else, you can throw up like a display box or something. You can say fail gracefully and not actually implement that. Okay, but you get the point. So that's a quick network check to get to what you're trying to do. So this is Hello World, and hopefully you can follow along so far. So this is just a quick busy indicator. That's my data grid that's showing it. Actually, let's do this on a phone just to make sure it's still working. And yeah, let's do a debug. I mean, the simulators are on the Wi-Fi, so network should come back and say yes. Okay, the iPhone simulator comes up. Oh, actually, you did see the busy indicator. Did you see that, folks? Catch that? So you saw that for a second, and then it went away when the data came in, right? So now this is showing too much of data for a phone because it's too wide. So I may not want to show all of the columns because what is doing right now is just auto-generating the columns based on the collection of the RESTful collection that I have from the RESTful endpoint. It's just auto-generating, and I can control, like, not show the title, not show it, but it's working clearly on iOS and Mac or Windows. Should be the exact same thing. All right, let's get to some of your questions. Jean is asking, could you please re-explain what references took place in which files after integrating MAUI NuGet? I'm missing something. Okay, let's get to that. So Jean, if you have just done the installation, like, the easiest way is to get the NuGet package, right? So if I can set this up in my Visual Studio, let's collapse this for a second. If I can set this up in Visual Studio, manage NuGet packages, I have this source. So notice how I can flip my source to NuGet feed, which gives me all of the NuGet things that are usual, and then I can flip that to the Telerik feed as well. That gets me all of the Telerik bits. This is going to give you Blazor and WPF and WinUI. This is nicely documented here. So if I go to Docs, if I go there, and if I go to Getting Started, and if I go to Mac, Getting Started with NuGet, this kind of steps you through, right? So in Visual Studio, I mean, you can, go to the download and, do the installers, MSI or, PKG installer, whether you're on, Mac or Windows, and then you can set up the source. So configure the source. It's kind of sets you up like nuget.telerik.com v3. And then it's going to ask you for your email or password just one time. It's going to cache it and then never ask you again. And that's how you can bring that NuGet package in. Once you bring it in, for Xamarin Forms, we had it broken down into multiple NuGet packages, but here we are smart enough to do some tree shaking. So we're not going to bloat up your app package just because you're bringing the whole thing in. But in my dependencies, you'll notice that the dependencies are on a per platform basis. The only thing that I have is one NuGet package. That's it. The logging thing is kind of by default. So here's my Telerik UI for MAUI. So if you have that NuGet package that you can also bring in either from NuGet, our source, or if you go into the installer, it's also sitting here in your packages directory. I mean, there are a few other ones here, especially some drawing APIs, some spreadsheet, and some other workflow type APIs, which we're not using any of it. So just that one UI NuGet package, you just take that folder, drop it in your project, and put a reference to it. That should work. Or you can bring down the NuGet package, from the source. So hopefully that answers your question, Jean. Let me know if you have more questions. But looks like a lot of you are asking about Blazor. Oh, Augustine is asking, can I start using Blazor Hybrid? Should I be using Telerik Blazor? That's a loaded question. The answer is yes, you can use either one. So the question here is, which one should I use? So, understand what is going on here, folks. This is a native app. What I mean by that is this UI, right? This is all XAML. This is going to render as native UI on iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, because that's a native busy indicator. That's a native data grid. So when you are running this on, iOS, you get a grid that has been rendered just using iOS, bits, and it's native to iOS, native to Windows and Android, and so on. So this way of doing things is purely tapping into XAML and rendering a native UI. You may not always want to do this, especially if you are using web. Then you have some other ways of bringing in the web stuff, and it's a matter of choice. So here, let's go up here. So what the question was, like, if you are already using web stuff, right? So you have all of these web components from us, especially Blazor. There are lots and lots of Blazor UI components. We have been at this for 4+ years now. So 100+, 150+ Blazor components, really popular. And all of this is meant to work for the web. But this is not meant to work for mobile and desktop, except what MAUI does, bring in Blazor. It kind of enables you to be able to work with this anyhow you want. So you can render all of our Blazor UI on mobile or desktop, but just understand these are web components. You're rendering it inside of a web view. So let's get to the web view, and I would like to build more things with you folks. So for now, let's put this. Well, before we go to Blazor, one last thing, and sometimes it works for me, sometimes it doesn't. Dependency injection is a nice thing to kind of keep handy. So let me see if I can make this work really quick. So take a look at what's going on here. In my app xaml.cs, we went to the shell. Let's just go to main page, right? If we did that, we are newing up a new main page, which is going to bring us to this, main page, and it's going to render that, right? So let's try that one time. Should not be any different from what we did. So let's start the debugging. I promise I will get to Blazor right after this. I just wanted to show you what's kind of built in and what's nice. So we get that. Okay, there we go. There's our grid, and it's pulling down data, and it's working exactly how we want it to. Now, you don't always have to do this because in my MAUI program.cs, I can do dependency injection that's kind of built in. So if I do a builder.services.add singleton, right? And then I say I want to add something of the type main page, right? And that, I think, is the syntax. Yep, there we go. So we are saying add singleton, add a single instance of this main page to be used throughout our application, right? So it's just a way of newing it up, but then detaching the, how it's, being initialized. So if I have this, I can go in here, and instead of newing it up here, I can say, why don't you pass in a main page, right? Let's just call it my page, okay? So now, instead of doing a new main page, I can just say my page, right? And hopefully that still does the same thing, right? So this is called constructor injection. So we are setting it up to be a dependency or a service that we are registering as a main page. The singleton says, give me the one instance of that object, so we're not depending on dotnet MAUI to do its garbage collection every time you new up something, and every time you go somewhere else, it doesn't have to do garbage collection. It's just one instance, right? And then we are just using that over here. So let's run this again. Let's make sure we didn't break anything. All right, it's trying to fire up the app. Oh, I did break something. All right, well, never mind. I was going to say that you can actually do this very easily, and it's not working out somehow. Okay, we'll go back to what it was, but this should be working the way it is, and I can just send that in. And also in my the thing I was trying to show you is in my main page.xaml. Notice how I'm newing up a view model. I should not have to do that either. I should be able to pass in the view model as a constructor, and then it realizes that I'm sending that in as a constructor, so it needs to new it up before the main page comes in. So once you come to the main page, you can just grab the view model from the dependency injection on the constructor itself. So apparently that's not working for me, and we're not going to spend too much time on it, but this is well documented, folks. So if I go out here, if I do a dependency injection, search that, yeah, it has a whole bunch of other things, but there are lots of videos about this. My good friends like Gerald Versluis does a nice job of let's see, dependency injection .maui. So this is from Gerald Versluis. This is James Montemagno, the good friends of mine. So there's a lot of videos out there on how to do this right. So it does work very nicely. Okay, let's go to Blazor. But let's see if any questions here, anything else. Ray is asking, are there any new components just for dotnet MAUI that wasn't in Xamarin Forms with Telerik? Yeah, there are a couple. I don't know off the top. And actually, we still have a couple of things that we had in the Xamarin suite that are not yet on the MAUI suite. So we are working on that quickly. But I think there are a couple of controls that are MAUI specific. And most importantly, what we're trying to do here is let's go back here to MAUI one time. This is a big responsibility, and we're not taking this lightly, because MAUI is supposed to work on both, mobile and desktop, right? And that is a big thing to say when it comes to controls, because all of a sudden you are expecting things to work on desktop, which is mouse and keyboard, and then work on mobile with touch, right? So same exact components. So we have to be very careful on how we render things, right? So let me show you an example of that really quickly. Let's close this. Let's see if I can show you a CryptoTracker. So this is a sample app that you get when you install the bits. Like, it's sitting right there in my examples directory. That's the CryptoTracker solution that I'm showing you. So take a look at what this app does. It's it's a full-featured app, and it's actually in the Apple and the Android and the Windows app stores as well. So you don't need to take my word. Go to the app stores, search for this, like search for Telerik. It's going to show up. It's a sample app. It just, all of the data is fake. It's just supposed to show you some things. This is all MVVM pattern without using an MVVM framework. So it's a good example app to take a look at. So let's run this first on Mac, just to kind of answer that question. Like, this is tricky to get done. So let's do debug start. It might take a second. I haven't built this in a while, so it's doing a build for Mac. Okay, so this is the CryptoTracker app. It's running on desktop right now, and you can see what it has is just a list of cryptocurrencies, which is you may or may not want to invest a lot in crypto these days, but you get the idea. It's a CryptoTracker. So it has a collection of all of these currencies, and then on the right, once I choose one, let's just choose one, then it shows me a history of how that currency, kind of like a stock exchange, how your stocks are doing over 6 months, over 1 month, over 1 week. You can have some charts like this, or you can have like a candlestick chart. So it's a full-featured app. So essentially, you tap on one, and then you go to the detail view and the history of that particular cryptocurrency, right? So that's the app when it's running on Mac. So, but take a look at the UI here. So when you talk about what the Telerik UI suite does for you, this is the kind of thing, like, we are conscious of how you're rendering it, whether it's on desktop versus mobile. But you as a developer can also do this fairly easily with dotnet MAUI. dotnet MAUI gives you the compile time checks to see where you're running this. Are you running this on desktop versus are you running this on mobile? And maybe you want to cater different experiences. Just because it's a single code base, works in both places, doesn't mean that the UI should exactly be the same. So if I stop this and let's now run this on a smaller user surface area like the iPhone, and let's go build this again. We'll wait for the simulator to come up. Okay, same exact app, right, folks? But you see the difference here. Because it's a smaller surface area, now you get that list view and it doesn't have the history. So if I tap on Bitcoin, now we navigate to this other page and it's showing you that same history, that same candlestick, same chart, same graph, but except now you have this in the navigation format. So we did not rediscover any of this UI. We want to reuse the code exactly between mobile and desktop, except we made this one a view and then we made this one a view. So this one's using a list view, the other one is using just some stack layouts with the grid in front. And when we notice that you are using this on an iPad or versus on a Mac desktop, we have larger surface area. We just put the two views together, so that combined thing makes up our desktop view. So navigation is just a little different. Hopefully that kind of I mean, it wasn't a question. I just wanted to show you that mobile and desktop can be different. Now there was a question about web view in particular. Let's and there was a question about SQLite as well. Let me try to show you something. I'm going a little off. This is a workshop. I'm just trying to show you as many things as I can. I would like to build some things with Blazor as well. But let me see if I can show you something that I've been working on a little bit. It's not nowhere close to being done, but I can show you. Let's look at the comments here. Sam Murad was saying I declared main page as a variable. So yeah, maybe that's what I was doing wrong for my DI. Where was the question about Blazor hybrid and SQLite? Anyways, let me try to show you, because I think I might answer two questions in once. So here is an app that I've been trying to work on a little bit. I'm very slow with this because I said I would try to do most of this online. So I have a Twitch stream. So like most Thursdays, if I'm home, I'm building this app entirely, while I'm coding live with you folks. So every Monday I do this, and actually it's a bit of a milestone that I just hit. So every Monday I put out this blog post. It's called Sands of Maui. This is it. So we actually just this past Monday we hit the 100th issue. So it's been going on for 100 weeks. That's how long I've been working on .NET MAUI. So it's a little newsletter type thing that talks about. This one's not a good example because it's the 100th issue. But let's go to the one behind one before that. So it collects 5 pieces of news from Microsoft and from the community, stuff that's been written, articles, video content, whatever it is that's relevant to .NET MAUI developers, and I put that together and I publish this every Monday. And folks were saying like, why don't you make an app out of this? So we just don't need to get an email. We can just have a notification and be notified every time there's a new issue out. So that's what I've been doing. And this is an example of how to use the web view. So all of this content that you see up here, this is already pre-formatted, right? So this is all HTML, CSS, it's nicely formatted. I don't want to redo this when I'm bringing it into an app, right? So here's an example of using what's called the web view. So, did I close the docs again for Maui? Let's go there. So there are 2 of these components, and sometimes it gets a little confusing which one to use, but once you understand it should not, hopefully. So if I go down here, user interface, where is it? Controls, views, present data. Okay, so there are 2 of these, right? So there is a web view and there's a Blazor web view. So the web view is nothing new. So this is kind of what Xamarin Forms also had. If you have any web content that is HTML, CSS, maybe a little bit of JavaScript, and you want to render that inside of a native app, then this is your friend. It is not very full-featured. It is literally meant to show some remote HTML document, or if you have a local document, then it can show that as well. So this is very good if you just want to show some web content inside of your .NET MAUI app. So they talk about how you set this up. Web view, you can just set the source property, and then it just shows you the whole web page within your MAUI app. So I'm actually using this. So take a look at this. When this app starts up, let's see, what am I doing? I have some models here. I have the issue model, which is again similar to what we just did. This one's missing the JSON properties, but it's camel case pretty much. and then I am pulling this all down with the data is actually in Azure Cosmos DB. So it's a document database, excuse me. I'm doing a task. This is an observable collection. So we are talking about, bindings. I don't have to do any of that notification changed property anymore because it's all done for us. And I can, mention each individual property to be an observable property, then it works out. But I'm, bringing back a list of issues, and then I'm trying to render that. And the way I'm rendering this is, here's the issue list view. Let's take a look at that first. So there are a bunch of things in here. Essentially, I have a list view that's rendering this. So let's go run this first. So when the app comes up, you're going to see a list of things first, and that's a list that's coming down from Azure Cosmos DB. This is not showing you all the things because it's cached. It's using SQLite, so it shows you some repeat data. So this is this list view, and then when you tap on one item, notice the template here. There's an item tap template. So when you tap on that, I carry the thing that you tapped on, and I give it to this other view, right? So this other page, this issue detail view, and I can do that because of my app XAML says, where's my app XAML? App XAML here, app XAML.cs. Notice how, this one's using the app shell, which has navigation built in, but you, instead of just saying new view, you can say new navigation page. This will take care of the last in first out, so I can do back and forth. And then if I look at how I'm rendering the actual issue of each one, that's an HTML CSS. So if we go into the issue detail view here, this is the XAML. So notice how this is just a web view, right? So I'm essentially pulling down the HTML and then I'm handing it off to that web view to render it, right? So let's see if this one actually has anything. Yeah, or maybe not. Oh yeah, there it is. There is something behind it because it did a cloud pull. So this entire thing is actually HTML, right? Because I already had this data nicely formatted for, this is the Sands of Maui issue 1, which was May or March of 2021. So it's been a while. This whole thing is coming down, and this is just all HTML being rendered inside of that web view. However, if I pull this up on a different platform, let me show you that. Let's change this up to, let's say, iPad Air, something that I haven't actually run this on. So let's go do the start. So now you're actually going to see more things because on a Mac, I have run this app before. So it's caching the data. So it actually doesn't actually go to the cloud to bring down that list. It's already, it has it. Oh, it's complaining about something. Why can't I run it? Give me maybe the iPad Pro. Okay, now it's coming back up. So on this simulator, I may not have run the app, so it's actually going to do a cloud fetch, and then I'm caching what I get back. I'll give it a second for it to come up. There you go. Busy indicator. Okay, see now you see a lot more, right? So now you see issues 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I have like up to 50 issues, and I can keep scrolling here. Yeah, I think 42. Yeah, up to 50 issues, right? So the 50th issue was, March 28, 2022, and the first one was, let's see, when was the first one? It was March 22nd, 2021. So it's been a while. So it pulls down this list, and then I can tap on each one. I can see the view. And the web view is the one that renders HTML, because this is not a Blazor application. This is still a native .NET MAUI application, except when I tap on the first one, it's just like this first view, this only view is the one that is HTML and CSS. So I'm using a web view to just render this. There is nothing Blazor about this. It's only this view that's showing you the web view. So the web view is kind of rudimentary. It only knows how to show local or remote HTML and CSS, right? So That's what this is meant to do. But again, if I launch this app again, it's actually cached. It's not going. So somebody was asking about SQLite. So this is one way of storing data. By the way, we'll look at maybe some things like preferences, which are, short key value pairs if you want to store data. But this is kind of relational. It's like a big document that I'm saving. Or this in this instance, it's like a list of things. So let me show you the NuGet package. So there are two in here. There is one called SQLite or dotnet.pcl, and then there is a SQLite PCL raw bundle. You need this as well. This is all in the dotnet MAUI docs, so you don't need to trust me for any of this. It's all well documented. So when we do the pull, let's go look into my view models here, issue list view. So here's what I'm doing. So, and again, this is not done yet, so the logic is not fully baked in, but essentially I have this thing called preferences, right? So preferences is just a little bit of storage that you get on iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac, which is tied to the app object. So if you uninstall the app, the preferences go away, right? It's very much tied to the app, and it's written on file on iOS, Android, Windows, or Mac. It's just, you don't need to worry about how they write it. It's abstracted. So it's a key value pair. So I have a simple thing called issue list in database. If I know that the issue list has already been cached in the database, then I don't go to the cloud, right? So I am simply, picking up that observable collection from my database service, which essentially reads and writes from my database. So let's go look at the database service here real quick. So I have a Cosmos service that goes to the cloud, and then I have a local database service, that's the name of my SQL database. This looks very SQL-like because it is SQL. And then I have a SQLite. It has some, and this database path, by the way, this is of the file system itself. So path combine, app directory, database file name. So it's essentially looking at the app directory for however this app is working on iOS, Android, and it's creating that db3 file of that app directory, right? So that's my file path. And then beyond that is just get and read, or get and put. So this is the get, and then this is the save, right? So essentially I know how to make a whole table, read that table, or write to that table. So that's how I'm saving or reading it back up. So you can notice that if I already have that flag, then I can read off the database. If I don't have that flag, which means you are doing this on a fresh machine or a fresh device where we have never run this app before, so then it's going to actually go off to the cloud, Cosmos service, fetch each data, and then it's going to set this flag to be true, and that's how you know that it's cached, right? So just a quick little example of WebView and SQLite together. Hopefully that answers some of your questions. Oh, Brian is asking, where can I find the code? You can't, because we are just coding this. The Sands of Maui, this I will put this up on GitHub, but also just the workshop code, I can put this up on GitHub. So my GitHub is github/whack my name, which is like, this is my handle on pretty much every social media. If I can type that. Oops, it was capitalized, but you get the point. Like that is github.com whack my name. That's where I can put up the source code. Recording, yes, recording will be available. What else? WASM, there was a question about WASM. We'll get to WASM when we talk about Blazor. In fact, let's talk about Blazor. I think we have spent quite some time on just the native apps, but hopefully this answers some of your questions. Now, let's talk about Blazor. So let's close this, and we'll new up a new page. And this time around, we'll do Blazor. And before we do, let's take a look at what exactly we are trying to do here. So this was the web view, as we saw. Now there's another component called BlazorWebView. This is new because Xamarin Forms never had this. This is new, and this one is a little bit smarter. It is still a web view. So compared to something like Electron, which ships with Node.js, ships with Chromium, dotnet MAUI trusts that most of your users will have a modern browser, an evergreen browser that's already installed, and we can just use that browser to bring in some web things inside of native desktop or mobile apps, right? So the Blazor web view is your way to do that, and it essentially is a web view, but it's a little bit smarter. So it knows routing, it knows navigation, and it knows JavaScript a little bit better than the web view. So let's take a look at what happens when we launch this. So let's go create this app, Maui Blazor app. And again, you folks can follow along if you want to, or you can just watch me fail. So .NET 7, sure, that's fine. Let's just say Maui Workshop Blazor. So now we are wanting to bring in some Blazor. Hit create, and the app should come up here. Okay, it's all done. So we get a .NET MAUI app that's scaffolded for us, but this one has a little bit of a difference to it. Let's take a look at what is different. So up front, if I look at the project file, and this is just the templated project, one noticeable difference is the project style SDK now includes Razor, which essentially means it can now render Razor components, which is exactly what Blazor is. So otherwise, there is no difference. Like you can still share your app icons, your splash screens, your fonts, your images, everything is the same. However, there is one difference in Maui program.cs. Now we have this extra service that's been registered, add Maui BlazorWebView. So it turns out that that BlazorWebView is not added by default because it is a very smart control. It tries to figure out what OS that you're on. Is it Android, or is it? Then it gives you Chromium. If it's Safari, then it gives you like WebView on macOS or iOS, and then if it's Windows, it gives you Edge. So it's a little smarter, and it's not built in by default. So it's only added when you add a Blazor project to it. So you add that. This one here is essentially lets you do developer tools, which we can look at. That's really fun to look at. And then everything starts out here as usual. If I look at my main page.xaml, this one's a little different. For those of you who do not like XAML, and I get it, it gets a little verbose. Maybe I'm old, I like my XAML, but if you don't want to write XAML, this is all the XAML you ever have to see. It is still newing up a content page, but it's doing a Blazor web view in here, right? And in the Blazor web view, it's saying, hey, there's an index HTML that I want you to look at, and also here's the first component of the type main. And if I look at that main component, that's this Razor file. This is essentially exactly the same code that your Blazor app uses when you're writing a Blazor app for web applications. It's pointing it to this main layout, and then it's doing its router thing. That main layout happens to be sitting here in your shared directory. That's main layout.razor. It has a nav menu built in, and so on. And then all of that index.html, that's also in your www root here. So that index.html brings in a little bit of JavaScript, and then it has this div tag. This is the div tag inside of which your entire Blazor application is loaded, and that's where it runs. But you don't see any of that as a user. So let's go ahead and run this thing on Mac Catalyst really quickly. So it builds. And so now, if you have done any Blazor, this will feel very familiar. This is, the new Hello World Blazor template, right? So you have your home, you have the survey prompt, you have a counter with the click event handler, you have the fetch data that does fetching of some fake weather data. So it's just essentially Blazor. But what we did was we said, we don't want any native UI in our app. This is just Blazor is all we want. So just give me Blazor. And that's exactly what it did. So every bit of this UI is essentially Blazor. So that's what that main page did. So this Blazor web view essentially took over the whole web page and said, let's give you all of Blazor. Now, you don't have to do this. If you don't want, you can actually mix and match. So check this out. If I can do a vertical stack layout, right? And I can do a label of text, maybe hi, if I can type. Right, and let's copy this and this. So this is a really bad example, but what I'm trying to say is you can mix and match native stuff with Blazor stuff, right? Oh, this is not formatted, right? Let's bring it over here. Okay, there you go. So I now have a vertical layout, and I have a label, and then I have a Blazor web view. So let's go run this now and see what we get. Okay, oh, this is looking really bad because the Blazor thing is hidden, because that high thing showed up, but then I don't have the height and width set up right, so it's taking up the whole thing. But if I put this in a grid and if I gave it like half the width, and then it will start working. But the point is, you can totally mix and match native UI with Blazor UI, right? But if you take that off, then all of your UI becomes just Blazor, right? So let's get rid of that and bring it back to what it was. So this is my Blazor UI, and everything is working nicely. But the UI part of it is actually coming from this little folder called Pages. So that's my index.razor. That's exactly the same as index.razor on the web. So you got my hello world, I got my server prompt, that's my counter, there's a button, and everything just works exactly the way you want. So did that answer some of your questions about Blazor? Let's see. Sam Murad is asking, we are building an app using Blazor for web and as a standalone Windows app. Okay. When we build the web, we can access our API using localhost. Yep. Base URI, is it possible to change the base URL for Windows apps so we can access it using JavaScript in the views? Oh, that's a loaded question. Yes, you can do JavaScript, and Blazor can also tap into JavaScript and use that inside when you're running this on Windows or Mac. I can try showing you an example, but I'm not sure if that'll be exactly what you are asking. Okay. Are there any, Augustine is asking, are there any design guidelines to ensure there is visual consistency using Blazor Telerik components across different platforms? All right, Augustine, that is a good question, and I don't have a good answer for you because it is being worked on. So let me see if I can show you. How do I search? Maybe for myself, because I do not remember what it was. There. So if you do a search on Telerik Blazor UI in native apps, you will likely end up on this post. This was published earlier in March. So what we're trying to say is all of the Blazor UI that we have, including developer tools and all the fun stuff that we do with Blazor, all of it is now welcome to native apps. So here is taking a .NET MAUI app, and I can add the Blazor reference to it as a NuGet package, right? And then I can do the same things of how we set up Blazor for web apps, bring in some, JavaScript and CSS dependencies, and then we will just say add Telerik Blazor in our MAUI app, just as an extension method. And then in our Razor files, we can start implementing some Blazor stuff, and off we go. So you see some .NET MAUI Mac Catalyst apps or .NET MAUI Windows desktop apps, but all of the UI is all Blazor. Right, and I can do this for like on an iPad or an iPhone as well. So there is nothing stopping you from doing this right now, right? You can take all of our Blazor UI and you can render them on .NET MAUI because it's a web view. It doesn't care. It will render anything. It will render Angular and React and Vue as well. However, what you're going to run into are any of that consistency that you're looking for. This essentially is being worked on right now. So in the caveats, like we are saying it, don't do this, it's experimental. It is something that our engineering team is working on for our R2 release, which is our second release of the year, which comes out in June, right? So post June, you should be able to use all of our Blazor UI with confidence across, mobile or desktop, and it'll be consistent. But there are some, edge cases, especially when it comes to being, responsive and so on. So we're trying to make sure everything is set up right. So it is still experimental as of now. There is nothing stopping you, but you may want to wait a little bit until like June, until we officially give you the go-ahead that it's good to use, right? But again, you can take a look at this source code and see how I'm doing this. I'm also happy to show you this, but everything works. There's nothing stopping you. All of our Blazor UI absolutely works on MAUI, except it's not officially supported yet. Okay, so hopefully that answers a little bit of your question. Yes, Sam Murad is asking some good questions here about running Blazor on a Windows app. Let me see if I can get to your questions and see if I can show you some examples. But I would like to get to your questions where we can talk through a little bit of what you're asking. Matuz is asking, can you show how you'd fix that situation with the high label inside the vertical stack panel? I don't know. It is maybe we want to use a grid because it was just hiding the panel inside because it took up too much of the space. Let me see if I can find an example. Maybe this is live. I'm like a DJ. I'm playing things on request, right? Let's see how much I can fail. So let's see if I can go to docs and if I can look up maybe a grid example that I can show you. Or a layout example, because what the question is like, what if I actually did want to do that, right? In the main page. So fine, I will try to fix it. I'm not sure if I know offhand how to, but let's go back and do what I just did. Text, we said this was going to be high, and we're going to close that. And we're going to stick that whole BlazorWebView inside. I think it's a matter of height that it's not being set. Now in a stack layout, we used to be able to set the height, but maybe I do want to do a grid layout. That way I can control exactly how much height each one has. All right, so hold on, I am going to do what every developer does, is go to the docs and try to figure this out. All right. Where are my layouts? Let's go to the grid and let's see if we can copy paste some code. I have a grid here. Yeah, that might kind of do. Yeah, the rows is what I might want to use. So instead of that, what if we did a grid, right? And in that grid, we're going to define 2 rows. First row is going to be like 20% of it. I don't need columns here, right? And then if we bring these 2 in, and I think the 2 star means like 20%, and the rest can be taken up by the BlazorWebView, I think. So let's do grid dot row is 0 based, so we'll do that. And can I do this on it? This might totally fail. I'm just going along, folks. Dot row is 1. So essentially we are now asking for a certain height, and let's see if this works. Let's see. Because we are asking for that label to be a certain height and the rest be BlazorWebView. Oh, well, kind of. You kind of see that, right? Okay, so hold on. This was terrible. How do I make it? Like, can I do a 0.5%? I forget what those exact things are now. Okay, well, it's still too big, but hopefully you get the idea, right? So that whole area is it's a grid, and that's a native control. That's a native label on iOS and Android and Windows, and then everything under that purple line, this is all the Blazor, right? So you absolutely can mix and match native with Blazor UI. Did that answer your question, Matisse? Hopefully. No, you're not nagging. This is great. Yeah, the vertical panel just took over the whole height for some reason, so I had to use a grid to give it a certain specific height. I'm sure there are the vertical panel can also dictate how much height each component would take, but anyways. So this is there. Now, one of the questions we get a lot is you're now saying that Blazor is welcome on .NET MAUI, but how welcome is it really? And actually, like Sam was asking a question, not this Sam, the other Sam, about running Blazor for both web apps and native apps. So let's close this for a second. I would like to come back and show you more of this example, but I do want to address that question because it is very doable if you wanted to. So let's get rid of this grid.row for a second. Okay, so let's close this for a second. I want to show you an example, and then we'll come back to this. So I have a solution here called Blazor Everywhere, right? Let's hold on for a second. I'm going to take this out because this was something I was trying to show. Oops, not that. Comment that and take that out for a second. Okay, so what does it not have? Like, oh, Android dependency, that's fine. So this is something, folks, you can actually find this on my GitHub. It is very simple, but it's unfortunate that there is no Visual Studio template that just does this for you, but also, I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing this. So take a look at what this is. So this is called Blazor Everywhere. It's one solution, right? So I create an empty solution, and then I've added these projects one at a time inside of the solution. So the first three, or the middle three here, are Blazor as it was meant for web apps. So I did a file, new project. So let's do that. So file, add project, add new project, right? So if I choose web, and then I get down here, I get Blazor server if it's running server side, with SignalR for the shadow DOM. I get WebAssembly. So if I do a WebAssembly, then it asks you a question like, do you want an ASP.NET hosted backend? So I said yes to that as well, which is why I got these three projects, or you can just use one server side. But here I have client and server. So the client is all WebAssembly. This is Blazor as it's meant to work with WebAssembly. The server is not really a server. It's essentially like an API. So I have my weather forecast controllers in here if I wanted to use that. And the shared thing is if you have like any validations that are shared between client and server, that's what it is. So that client project should be everything that we want a Blazor project to be, except you'll notice that it's missing a couple of things, right? So it's missing the pages directory, which is all of Blazor's UI components, as all of the Razor components. It's missing that, and it's missing some styles, because I have put all of that in this separate project. This is called what's called an RCL, a Razor class library. So essentially, I want to truly use Blazor for both web apps and native apps, right? So when we look at the .NET MAUI Blazor project, it's trying to put Blazor inside of MAUI, which I don't think is very practical, because you don't want to, like, it is for people who are doing Blazor. You don't want to completely give up on your web app that's with Blazor. You want to reuse that same UI on web and mobile and desktop, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. So this is a Razor class library. It's not an executable by itself, but this was the one that has the pages, the counter, the index, that right here. And then there's some www with the CSS that's also shared. So that Blazor shared UI is now referenced by both my web app and my native app. So here's the dependency. If I go down to the projects, you can see the shared UI is referenced right there. Right, so and this native, this is the .NET MAUI project, exactly what we just created, except it's also missing the pages directory because I'm reading that pages directory from the shared UI. With just this little setup, so there are three things I added to this solution. One is a Blazor web project, one is a Blazor native project with .NET MAUI, and then a shared library, which is Razor class library. With that one little thing, I can change up where I'm running my app, right? So set a starter project. Now it's a web app, it recognizes that, and I can fire this up, and it would be a Blazor app exactly as you want. So my browser didn't come up for some reason. Localhost 5000 is where it's running it. Let's go to localhost 5000. There's my Blazor app, exactly as you want. Counter works and everything works, but you will notice that I'm actually reading some of the window dimensions here. So this is JavaScript, just intentionally trying to read some JavaScript window size because this is Blazor. Blazor can do JavaScript, so I can read that. But I can also stop this, and I can switch up where my native project is working. And this is what I was trying to show in the code before we switched it up. So let's go to, did I close it? I closed it. Let's go to this app-wide CSS. This is the button that gives you that color, and I can change up that background color to be, whatever. Let's just say red, right? If I do that, and let's comment out this line. Now I made a change, if I made a change to index.razor or custom.counter.razor, it's going to be picked up by both the MAUI app and the web app. So that's the beauty of it. It's truly a shared UI. So let's go now build this and run this on a native app. This one happens to be on Mac Catalyst. So I should be getting that counter button that's red. And now notice how it recognizes that, hey, I'm running on Mac Catalyst. Now I can tap into dotnet MAUI APIs to read the platform of the window dimensions. Counter, now that's red. You see that? And if I go back now to the web client, oops, sorry, I hit the go again. Close that, change that up. It might be caching it, but let's see if I can show you. Do a build, debug, localhost 5000. I might have to release or erase my history to show you that. Let's see. No, it's already red, so it didn't cache it. So you see that how I'm making one style change and it shows up for both web and native apps. So Sam Murad, to answer your question, it is actually running some JavaScript. So take a look at this repo. It's up on my GitHub. So the way Blazor for web reads JavaScript is, how it works with the web. So I have a couple of, service implementations here. I have a platform info that's reading the browser dimensions, and I have a www here, which is actually reading the browser width and the height. So you can actually invoke all of the JavaScript that you want. And that is done because in your index.html, it's bringing in that WebAssembly JavaScript. So that's the interop between JavaScript and .NET, if I may say. Okay, so just a quick example of Blazor running both on the web and native. Let's take a look at your questions if there is any. Okay, so Christian did explain what was going wrong with my vertical or the grid. 2* essentially means the upper row has double the height than the lower row. Okay, see, I've forgotten my XAML and the height and padding and spacing and all those things. So thank you, Christian. Let's do, we got like half an hour left, I think. Let's go back to our project, and I want to show you some fun things that you can pull off with Blazor. So let's go, where was that? Maui Workshop Blazor. Okay, so we had a BlazorWebView and everything is working, which is great. But how welcome is Blazor on .NET MAUI, right? Can we do some very native things with .NET MAUI on Blazor? So let's try it. Let's go look at index.razor. And I'm going to add a few things here just to show you the native functionality. So let's do maybe a H1, H3, H3, that's fine. And let's do a message, right? So I'm going to declare these strings in my Blazor app. So bear with me. Let's do one more. Let's call it whatever, device. Yeah, I need to do an @ So the @ says this is running on the client side. It's a variable device info. Okay, so 2 H3s that I'm adding just under that. Now let's add a button, a Blazor button, and we're going to call the on click so I can respond. Okay. On click, we're going to say, give it a function, let's say do native stuff, right? And can I set the text property? No, how do I set the text property? I think I can just close this, do native stuff. Okay, so I have a button, and when I click on that button, I want to write some code which actually does something. So you folks can write this with me if you are inclined, or you can just see me fail. So add code, that's Blazor's way of saying, hey, this is some code that needs to be executed at C#. So let's define the 2 strings that we just did. So you're going to say a string of, it's not giving me IntelliSense for some reason. That's fine. It's Visual Studio being Visual Studio sometimes. So string device info. Okay, now check out how easy it is for me to go into native stuff. So let's define that function. It was called do native stuff, right? So we'll define that function. I'm getting no IntelliSense whatsoever, which is weird. What? No, that's not right. I had to close that, and then, yeah, there we go. I am totally not sure why it's not giving me any IntelliSense. All right, so native stuff, right? So let's first set that message thing. So we're going to do, let's say, hello world from plus. So here we can tap into some .NET MAUI, APIs, right? So there's this thing called app info .name. Can I do that? So that's the name of the app, I think. So since I'm not getting any IntelliSense, I don't know if it's working. So let's do a build. And then we'll see what is failing. Thank you, folks, by the way, for hanging out with me. Feel free to go get a drink or lunch or dinner if it's time for you. Just chill along with me. I will get another throat drop in case I start coughing again. That wasn't fun. Okay, it's still building. Let's see if you folks have any questions. Oh, I see. So Samurad was asking is if you are running Blazor inside of a Windows app, I'm guessing through .NET MAUI, or are you using Electron or something like that? Can you access the CRUD controllers like APIs from a different app? Yes. Now, if you're using HTTP client, then it might need to be an HTTP endpoint. But if it's like an IP address that you know, and you can go to that service directly, then yes, I don't see why you would not be. I had demos where like I would have like a minimal API hosted on my Windows machine on a different thread because it's like ASP.NET process, and then my Blazor app would be able to interact with that API. So I would think you should be able to. Okay, this built, but I am not getting any IntelliSense whatsoever. Let's see if this will work. Okay, so I have my button show up. That's nice. And when is the button hooked up? Yeah. So when I click on that button, it should fire off this one. And this message thing is empty, but it should say hello world from that name, right? Once I click on it. Oh, okay. Yeah. See, there you go. So you see that, folks? When it says hello world from MAUI Workshop Blazor, that is the name of the app, right? And that is a native property that we're using, app info. That's a .NET MAUI object. And this is all Blazor code, but there's nothing stopping us from going in like this. Let's add more to this. So if I can say running as, this is bad, but I don't get any IntelliSense at all. Okay, running as, let's get into some device thingies here. So I just know those APIs off the top. I've also written this code before, so I'm no magician. I would have to look up this code to do this if I had not. So there is this thing called device display. That's a .NET MAUI API, and I can do main display because it can support multiple displays, and I can do orientation, right? Yeah, I think just that itself should be giving us what orientation we are working on, right? So save that. Let's go build that again. But device display doesn't contain main display info. I'm sorry. All right. See, this is what happens when your IntelliSense stops working. Okay, do native stuff. There you go. So do you see how it's running on portrait now? Because now it says, hey, I know what what you're running this on, so that's nice. Now let's do a little bit more here. So I already have this thing called device info, right? That's my string name. So I can say device info. That's actually a .NET MAUI class dot name, right? Maybe I should move this one over. And I should do that here. So we can say device name running as portrait or whatever, right? So those are the two things I'm filling in just to show that you can do some very native things with Blazor. So let's run this here. Okay, so do native stuff. Oh, there you go. So it's saying, hey, oh, this is actually not right. It's not running on iPad. It should be saying it's running as Mac Catalyst. Well, maybe since it's Mac Catalyst is essentially a glorified iPad, it probably thinks this is still the iPad, but it's running on portrait mode. Let's actually run this. Hold on for a second, just to make sure we didn't butcher this. Let's run this on an iPhone. Same Blazor UI. I'm just tapping into some, APIs. Okay, running on my iPhone now. Oh, this might be a pro tip moment because there are some issues with the workload right now. So the BlazorWebView doesn't always render, okay? But there's a fix for that. And this is especially if you're on an ARM processor, like I'm on an M2 Mac, or so Apple Silicon Macs, like M1 or M2 Macs have this problem. But there are just times where you have to just be explicitly telling it how to get that stuff. So let's look up another project where I have done this so I can fix it for you. Let's look up this CS proj. Sublime is fine. Essentially, you just need to force it to run it on an ARM64 simulator. So I can close that for a second. Yeah, let's go back here. We'll go to my CS proj. And this is only if you're on an Apple Silicon machine. Sometimes you run into this. I think they have actually fixed this in the latest workloads. I just have the one behind the latest one. Okay, so this one, property group, I'm just saying runtime identifier, forcing it to run on the iOS simulator on x64. All right, so that should reload. And let's see if I can now make this work back on an iPhone 14. Any questions from you folks? Let's see. It's trying. Oh, there it is. Okay, hold on, folks. Let's go back. So now it does render. And notice that it recognizes that I'm on an iPhone, so smaller surface area. So it'll give you that hamburger menu automatically, which is nice because like Blazor is responsive a little bit by itself. So let's do native stuff here. Yeah, see, now it works. So so this one here, I think on a Mac Catalyst, on Mac desktop by default, it just says iPad because that's the bigger surface area it knows how to. But then on an iPhone, it says iPhone 14 Pro Max running as portrait. And then if I flip this, and I have it only on the click event handler. So if I tap this again, now it says landscape. Yeah, see that? So it's nice. It's Blazor, but it's well, that didn't flip at all. Oh, now it's flipping. There you go. So it is Blazor, but you have access to some very native things on Blazor. Which is nice. There's one more thing that I like doing or showing because it kind of truly showcases that Blazor can be as native as you want it to be. So let's see if I can show you that. And I will have to look up some things here because I will not remember exactly. But you see this fetch data .razor. This is the fetch UI for Blazor to show that weather forecasting. It's all fake. It's all driven by a JSON file in here somewhere, but this is the whole forecast that gives you that forecast display. How about we mentioned something right in here. Let's see. Right in here, we can have an H3. right? And let's do let's just do geolocation data, because this is fake for Blazor, but we are running on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device. We actually have the user's geolocation very easily. So why would we fake it if we can actually do geolocation? So geolocation info, right? That's what I want to show. So you go in here, weather forecast, this is where it's pulling the forecast, that's fine. On initialize, let's see if I can pull up some of this code here. Okay, so let's do, what do we call it? We called it geolocation info, right? So in my code, I'm going to define a private string called that, right? And we're going to come in here, and geolocation info would be set to await. I will do, well, it actually it is already async, so that should work. Await geolocation info. No, that's the variable. I want the .NET MAUI namespace, which is just called geolocation, right? Dot. Oh, it's reverting to that again and again, which I don't want it to do. Geolocation. So I'm tapping into the .NET MAUI APIs here. So here, I can show you where I'm doing this from. If I go into the platform, where is, hold on, platforms, platform integration, storage, device features, geolocation. That's what I'm doing. So I can just do, oh, and I need to do this. This is a good reminder of how permissions work. So I'll show you that in a second. I'm trying to do this. That, right? So I'm trying to do that whole thing, right? So get me the last known location. And what I can do is, if this geolocation.info is not null, then I can read, actually this, let's not make this, let's just do a var here, location data, right? And if that location data happens to be not null, syntaxing is way off here. What I want to do is geolocation info equals, say, device location, right? And let's read the lat and the long from that. So now I have location data dot latitude, which again, no IntelliSense for me, thank you. That's great, Visual Studio. And then we'll say, let's separate things out with something here. And then I can say plus and location data dot longitude, right? So I'm reading the lat long of the user just from the .NET MAUI interface itself. All right, will this fail on me? Yes, it will fail, because we didn't do the permissions thing. You see that on iOS and on Android, you will need to do this. So in the platform iOS info plist, you need to add this following key, right? So ns location when usage description. So copy that. So we'll go back here. So now this is an example where you do have to go into the platform, because these are platform specific permissions, right? So if I go into iOS, I get this info plist, which can I open with property list editor? Oh, sure, this is nice. So I can add a new entry. I can call that entry this thing. And this is essentially a JSON file, so I can add this however I want. And it's not letting me add. That's weird. Okay, so let's open this up separately, maybe. Open this with VS Code. That's fine. Okay, so here's my whole JSON file, and I just want to copy that whole thing out. within my dictionary, app icons, assets, that, right? So fill in the reason why your app needs location. I will stalk you, user. Okay, don't say that obviously, but I'm just trying to have a little fun. So that's my key, because it needs that key for it to be declaring to iOS that this app is trying to use geolocation, and hopefully it can just pick up that key and throw that permissions thing in here. Okay, what did we do? Is this going to compile location data? We just did that, and then we read the geolocation, set the geolocation string. Okay, let's see if this builds. This might be the last thing we do here, folks, and I can spend the rest of the time answering questions. What do you mean it's invalid? I'm just trying to run this on a Mac or on an iPhone. Why do you care about Android? Can I run this? Okay. Apparently it was a build error is not bad enough to stop. Okay. All right, so let's go to fetch, because we did this in the fetch data, right? .razor, right? Let's go to fetch. Yeah, okay, it worked. Okay, I didn't think it will actually work on first try, but it did. All right, folks, do you see what's happening here? You see this prompt here? For those of you who do iOS, this looks familiar, right? And Android will do the exact same thing. This is essentially iOS saying, hey, this app is trying to read your geolocation. Is that okay with you? Yes or no? Right? So that's where it says, like, see, I will stalk the user. That shows up right from that key dictionary pair in my info p list down onto my Blazor app, and I can say allow once, and there you go. So you notice that the blue thing comes up that says this app is reading your location, just the way like Uber or other location-based apps do. And that is the lat, and that's the long for the simulator, which I'm guessing is the lat long for Apple's Cupertino headquarters. So, I mean, it's a simulator. You can actually simulate location nicely with maps, but envision having this on a device where you're walking about, and then it gets your geolocation, and you can actually track the user. You can set the precision and so on. So that's all real nice. And now, all of these APIs, everything that we do here in .NET MAUI, all of these APIs are accessible to you from Blazor as well. So all of this device integration, battery, device displays, all of sensors, camera, media, haptic feedback, vibrations, all of this can be done from Blazor, but just know that some of them have limitations where you have to declare some permissions, especially if you get into like, secure storage. I think they talk about this here. Storage, you have file pickers, secure storage. So if you are trying to store things which are very secure, then you have to use secure storage, and then that for iOS means essentially keychain. So now you have to add another file called entitlements.plist. That's where you have your Siri, your keychain, and your other iOS integrations that have to do with Apple services. And Android has, I'm guessing, similar things like Android level 6.0 API level 23 and up, so you have to define what secure storage means and so on and so forth. But everything works here exactly as you would want. And one thing to point out with .NET MAUI, if I go back to the docs here, they do talk about this very upfront. Like, they're clear, like there are some limitations, there are some hard cutoffs. So .NET MAUI works with Android 5, so API 21 and up, iOS 11 and up, and macOS 10.15 or higher for Mac Catalyst. So you just cannot go behind that. And this is maybe what some folks are, if you are trying to support older devices, maybe you already have Xamarin Forms app. Hopefully your users can upgrade, because eventually, Xamarin Forms support will run out. That doesn't mean it's dying, but you have like until 2024. I think they extended it up to like December 2024. So another year and a half to move your Xamarin Forms projects over to .NET MAUI. And hopefully your users come along, because there are some, minimum requirements. Okay, what did I miss? Let's see. Oh, Jake was helping me in the chat room. Thank you, Jake. Device info.name is giving the name of the device, not the type. Yeah, okay. I understand. Sam Murad was asking about that Blazor and Maui, or Blazor running on Windows desktop. Let me have my throat drop here, folks. Let's see. The endpoint HTTP client gives us 000, which is we cannot use. So you know what that 000 is? I think so. What Sam is talking about, I think, is let's go back here and let's see. So let's do this thing, okay? So I'm going to take off that debug thing. So we are always doing this. I don't care about logging right now. So let's add this thing called the Blazor developer tools, right? This is what every web developer uses. It's your developer tools, and you should be able to debug this. So when the Maui app runs, I think that's kind of how it identifies itself to macOS. So let's run this. So it's running. Right, so that's my Blazor app. Now I think, let me go look up Safari here. So I have developer tools. This is a setting in Safari. You can enable developer tools. Yeah, see that? So now I'm within Apple's walled garden. So good things happen. It knows how to talk to each other. So take a look at this here. So it recognizes that here's my iPad, which is actually connected to my, and that's my iPhone 14 Pro Max. That's a simulator, right? So notice the name of the app here. It's 0000 because that is what the app identifies itself as. I don't know why, but if you are, hosting your API on a Windows service, maybe you want to position that as an IP address that's open to your other Windows applications. Because like if it's a Maui app, then it may identify itself as 0000. But hopefully your API is not another Maui app. Then if your API is on the machine or anywhere else on the network where you can reach it, yeah, I think it should be accessible. But I think that's what Maui apps are, identify themselves as, working on macOS in particular or on Windows essentially. Oh, and by the way, I pulled it up. I never actually showed you. So what's this? So simulator, I can go in here and check this out. This is the web inspector, the Safari web inspector, which is the same exact thing as Chrome DevTools are a little bit more advanced. But if you want to muck with your HTML and CSS and JavaScript while your app is running, this is the way to do it. So then just think about this. This is a native app here running inside of my iOS simulator, and yet I can change things in here. So let's go in here in my div. That's my page, and notice how even like this highlighting thing works here. So that's my page, that's my sidebar, that's my main, that's my content, and there is hello world, right? So if I change this to say hello workshop, hit enter, and you see that right there. So it is literally HTML, CSS, JavaScript running inside of a web view, and it's a smart web view, and you can, tweak things as you go along because you have your, web developer tools accessible while your app is running natively on an iOS or an Android simulator. So it's a nice, mix and match type of story. All right, I've been talking a lot, folks. So let me know if what other questions you have. George is saying, thanks for showing all this. Thank you. Logging up for work meetings. Thank you, George, for staying along. And I will, much of what I showed off should be in my GitHub repo, but if you want, I can push these ones up as well. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of different things. Anything that I'm missing? Let me go through your questions. And if I did not answer your question, please feel free to just chime in one more time. I'm just trying to look through all of the Q&A and let's see if I missed anything. It was so nice to see people from all over the world, India and Austria and Australia and Poland and Sweden. That is really nice of you folks to join. Let's see. Any questions that I did not answer? A lot of you asked about recording. That should be in. We did bring in Blazor during the workshop. Yep. Oh, this one's a good one. Adam Craig was asking, like that .NET bot, that logo that shows up is a PNG, not an SVG file. SVGs work better, but even if you give it an SVG file, like in your actual, file system, you can still refer to it as a PNG because that's what it, converts it to when it's rendering. So I think we took it off here. I think if we can go back to the other one, I'll show you that. So let's close this real quick. And hold on, let's close this and let's go to where was the Maui workshop thing. So I think what the question was is where is it? Resources. That image was a .NET bot SVG. You see that? But then it's referred to. Oh, we took it out, so we can't even look at that now. But you can refer to that .NET bot as a PNG because it still identifies that. But PNGs will be fine as long as it's a high intensity, high density, true fidelity PNG, like high resolution. But SVGs are, that much better. All right. Yeah, I think that's most of the questions that I can see in the chat room. Yeah, that's all I can see. And yeah, the recording should be up. Oh, there was a question about like WebAssembly. WebAssembly doesn't have a play with .NET MAUI and Blazor because Blazor and .NET MAUI are, so when we run Blazor, it's running natively on the machine. It's the same runtime. So .NET 6, .NET 7, .NET 8. So Blazor is not running as server-side Blazor or WebAssembly Blazor. It literally is Blazor. It's just been compiled and run on the same machine. There is no concept of a server or a client. Like the client is literally the client app that you're working on. So that's why Blazor's performance is that much good on desktop or mobile because it's literally running on the metal. So there is no concept of WebAssembly. All right, so hopefully, folks, you got something out of it. Essentially, if you are new to .NET MAUI, start here. This is a new ecosystem. Well, relatively new now. It's about 2 years old, but things have come along. The tooling is now stable across Windows and Mac. It's not something we would, we have always been able to say, but now it is stable. So Visual Studio on Windows or Mac is really good. Get started with the docs, get started with the tools, and then for your UI components, there are a few other UI components out there, but hopefully you see what we are trying to do with Telerik UI for .NET MAUI. It's not just the UI components; it's just the support, the documentation, and standing by your side, anything that you might need, and then just constantly churning with releases, newer and newer UI components and UI components that are polished, that are performant, and that are meant to work on both mobile and desktop seamlessly. So that's what our team and the engineering folks have been up to. So, all right. So yeah, looks like some of you have to go eat some chili. That's nice of you to say, Dominic. Actually, I have not had lunch either. So I have one more meeting after this, and then I will go eat a late lunch. But I think that's it from me here, folks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Hopefully this was, a little bit fun. It's, good to see another developer struggle because that's when you knew things are real. But hopefully you can see that most things do work. You can get around some of those little, annoyances sometimes. But .NET MAUI is something I am rather excited about because it's, cross-platform .NET Dev. I can go to iOS or Android, Windows or Mac easily. I can have all the UI. I can talk to any web services, and times are good. Tooling is good, and it'll only keep getting better as we go along. So that's all I will say here, folks. And thank you so very much. Oh, sorry. One last thing, Jarno Campi, or Jarno, if I'm saying your name right, publishing. That is a whole other beast to get into. There are some documentation, but it's not everything, right? So if you look at, where is the publishing part? So what, no, this is not publishing. Oh, there is the publish, right? So they do have some guidance on how to publish to the app stores, right? So Apple App Store, Android App Store, there is some guidance on this, but it might not be everything. So you might have to just look around. There have been some, good blogs written about this. My good friend Matt Goldman, if you want to look him up, he has a very nice video series on how to publish to iOS, how to publish to Android stores. So look it up. There might be some roadblocks, but overall, it's a native app package. It's no different from publishing a native iOS or an Android app. It's just built differently. So there is some help already. Okay, all right, folks. Thank you, Mike. Hackstrom is thanking me. Thank you for hanging out. I really appreciate you folks. And go have lunch, go have dinner, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and yeah, have a good day. Have a good rest of your week. And thank you so much. With that, I'm signing off, and bye. Thanks.